Hold on, people.
Keep talking.
Can you hear me now, Frank?
I can hear you, but I can't hear you from YouTube.
Hold on. Well, no. Oh, wait. Well, let's see. Hold on. It's coming.
We're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Check 1, 2. Here we go.
Yeah.
All right. We'll just start over from the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. You got to love live, right? There you go. All right. Welcome to Crime Talk with Scott Reisch, right? The most fact-driven, unbiased, true crime channel. Normally, Tuesday night is our Tuesday Night Live, but we're changing up the format a little bit. Instead of just listening to me talk, let's talk to interesting people. And so one of the interesting people that I know that is here tonight is Mark Carlson. Now, he's a former police officer. He is my private investigator that we use primarily here at my law firm. And he's just an interesting guy. And I think he has a lot of good perspective as it relates to policing, law enforcement, criminal justice, all that good stuff. And of course, we've got some questions for you because Julie put out a, I don't know what it was, a tweet or something that said, hey, what do you want to know from Mark? So we'll get that. Hopefully we'll answer all the questions. I don't think we have a time limit, so we can go as long as things are, everybody's happy, and we'll keep it that way. So we got the sound back. Sorry about that. You know, it's live. This is live working without a net. All right. First of all, Mark, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let's relax. All right. So how long have we known each other now? What is it?
It's got to be close to 15 years.
10, yeah, I was going to say 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's been a long time. And like I said, we've done a lot of cases. We spent this afternoon together, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
And it was one of the few days that I was ready to go early tonight. Not only one, because we ordered food, but second of all, because I just had to decompress from that conversation that we had to have with a client this evening. So enough about me. Let's talk about you for a while. All right?
Okay.
So how'd you get into being a private investigator? Just kind of start from the beginning.
I had been in law enforcement for 11 years.
Okay.
I was leaving law enforcement. Wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I actually had a defense attorney who was a former prosecutor who I knew.
Is that our mutual friend, Steve?
It is, yes. He reached out to me, the private investigator that they were using. I don't know if he went out of business or moved, I'm not sure, but they needed somebody. And he said, would you be willing to help us out for a while? And I said, sure. And that was 16 years ago.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And do you still enjoy it?
I do still enjoy it. I've realized that I would be a difficult person to supervise, so being self-employed is definitely good for me.
Self-employed has its perks, does it not?
It does.
It also has its downfalls too, because if you're not working, you're not making any money.
Right.
So talk to me about, first of all, how'd you become a cop? Why did you want to be a police officer?
Boy, that's there's a lot there. When I was in college, first of all, I went to college because the option of going to the military or going to work didn't appeal to me, and I knew I had one of three choices. So I went to college, had no idea what I wanted to major in, floated between several different majors. I had a part-time job working at a Cub Foods. It's kind of like a Costco kind of thing or whatever in the Midwest. And I was an undercover shopper, and I would arrest stop shoplifters and then call the police. And the guy who was working there doing the same thing, he and I became best friends. He was a criminal justice major, and he kept trying to talk me into criminal justice major. And when I found out that it was statistically the easiest major at the university, that's what I majored in.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then you became a police officer, right?
I did. It's funny. I knew that I wanted a job that I didn't just sit behind a desk all the time. I wasn't just doing the same thing every day. Yeah. And I couldn't really figure out what that was. And the more and more I got to know about police work, the more it appealed to me. And then I moved to Colorado and was a security guard and just decided I've got to go to a police academy. I can't keep doing this kind of stuff. So I put myself through the police academy and applied for several different jobs and took the first one that was offered.
Great. And then ultimately you left the police department. And like I said, you started 16 years ago being a private investigator. Obviously, you don't just work exclusively for me. You work with lots of other attorneys, right?
Right. Yep.
So what does what's involved in being a private investigator?
Well, there can be a lot of different things. I primarily do criminal defense investigation. I didn't necessarily always want to, but that's kind of the direction my business has gone.
Sure.
You know, I do personal injury and wrongful death cases, a lot of different stuff, but I would say 90+% of my business is criminal defense. What that entails for me is, you know, an attorney contacts me, says, hey, I have this case, you know, do you want to work with us? They usually give me the discovery, however big that file might be. I guess nowadays it's electronic. It's not paper.
Everything's electronic. Right. It's a pain in the ass.
So I read through what I know that I need to read through. I don't, you know, we have cases that are 7,000 pages, and it's just, I don't need to go through every one of those for what I do. I might sort of skim everything, but basically what I'm looking for is narrative information, because a large part of my job is recontacting people that gave statements, identifying people who maybe were witnesses but didn't give a statement or weren't talked to, those kind of things. So what I really try to focus on is the narrative information that's already been presented in the police report and follow up on that.
Yeah. And sometimes the attorney goes with you. Sometimes the attorneys say, hey, go talk to this person, ask about this, so to speak, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say 95% of the time I go by myself. And a lot of attorneys, like you and I have worked together for a long time. I mean, mostly you hand me a file and say, go to it.
This is what I want. This is what I'm looking for.
Yep. And so I go to it. I write reports on, you know, all the things that I do and send you the reports. And then if there's follow up to do, you know, you get back to me and say, let's try to follow up with this, or okay, let's find this other person now and see what they have to say.
Now, I have said this quite frequently, and I tell this to my younger attorneys that work here with me, is that most of the cases aren't going to turn on the facts. It's not going to turn on, the law. It's not going to turn on the law. Like, this one case is going to make everything break. No. It comes down to who can find the best facts. And that, in my humble opinion, is usually with the investigator. Do you find most people like to talk to you when you show up on their doorstep?
I am always shocked at how many people are willing to talk to me.
Everybody wants to talk.
Most people want to talk, especially people that are not necessarily regulars in the criminal justice system. But even some of those want to talk. I mean, I think people have an inherent need to be heard, to tell their side, to try to convince somebody, whatever it might be. I mean, it's pretty rare that somebody does not talk to me.
And do you usually get a little tidbit of information that maybe wasn't in their initial police report that they, filled out real quick on the side of the road, or, after a shooting or something?
Yes and no. Sometimes you get a lot of information that was not in a report. Sometimes I'll read the report back I'll ask them questions first.
Yeah.
Get their answers. Actually, let me backtrack. Usually what I do is I say, tell me what happened. No. And then I base questions off of that. And then I start looking at the statement that's attributed to them, whether it's a police report or a statement they wrote out. And I'll ask them specific questions based on that. Sometimes people will say, I didn't say that.
I know, which is always interesting, isn't it?
It is. And so, if there's not a recording,
tell me what you said. Tell me what you saw.
Exactly. Or I said that, but that was taken out of context, or, well, I remember it differently now. Whatever the case is, I still take notes and I still write a report on it. As you know, it's not unusual for a witness to give 3 or 4 different statements.
Yeah.
And they're frequently not all the same.
Exactly. And that goes directly, prior inconsistent statements or consistent statements, goes directly to their credibility in court as their ability to recall and recollect. And, some people, they get so wrapped around, well, I said this to the police, or somebody said this to the police. Okay, but the witness is still going to, just wait. Cross-examination's coming. Because in any big case, I can guarantee you, the defense has sent out an investigator to go talk to those witnesses and say, hey, is this all you said? Is there anything else that you want to tell me? Well, or, and sometimes it's pound sand, which is from the defense side. I like that too. Do you remember when my investigator, Mr. Carlson, showed up at your doorstep? Very polite gentleman. Yeah. He was nice, wasn't he? Said he didn't have to talk to him, but he'd like to talk with you. Yeah. You refuse to talk to him because you're hiding stuff, right? Yeah. So no matter what they do, it works out great.
But that's exactly, it's the same thing when police are taking a statement, because somebody doesn't have to give the cops a statement.
They don't.
So it's used exactly the same way by either side. And that's just, that's part of the back and forth that, the adversarial system, presents, I guess.
Which I love. The beautiful thing about the adversarial system is the truth is going to come out, whether it's from when the charges are filed or whether it's at a trial. A pretty close version of it is going to come out.
Absolutely.
Witness says A. Well, in cross-examination, they say A and B. Witness, second witness says A, B, and C. And some guy's going to say they're going to either have to concede that happened, or maybe it didn't, or maybe there was something in between. And that's how the process works.
Exactly.
Giving everybody their due process.
Right.
So we were chatting a little bit before this, and I didn't realize it, that you used to have to be licensed in the state of Colorado to be a private investigator. Tell me what happened there.
Well, that was only for a very short time. So prior to 2015, there was no licensing in Colorado for private investigators. A group of private investigators got involved, had been lobbying, trying to make that happen for several years. In 2015, a law was passed, so you had to be you had to get a license through Colorado, through DORA.
The Department of Regulatory Agencies.
Yes, thank you. And that law was good for 5 years. It had to be, legislation had to be passed to renew that law. It did. And then my understanding is the governor vetoed it. So August 31st of this year was the last date that any private investigator in Colorado was licensed.
Wow. Now, what did you have to, is that good for you, bad for you? Does it make any difference whatsoever?
I think there is some inherent credibility that comes with, at least I went through the licensing process with the state. Apparently part of the reason that there was a push for that initially was that, anybody could say they were a private investigator, they could hang out a shingle. So if they were a convicted felon, if they were, convicted of fraud, if they were whatever, anybody could do it. And there was no criteria, there was no qualifications, there was no anything. So at least there was some standardization as far as licensing requirements, minimum number of hours that you've worked investigations, and even hours worked investigating as a police officer could go towards that hour requirement. So, some private investigators are former cops. I would say most probably are not. And there's a lot of different, I do mostly criminal defense, but there's private investigators who do mostly workers' comp cases or insurance fraud,
sure,
or cheating spouses, or, all different kinds of things. This is just kind of the direction that my work happened to go. And so that's mostly what I do.
Yeah. And, the whole licensing thing, I remember when there was a big push and there were people and an organization that was really pushing for it hard, because there were lots of people with felony convictions that probably not the most trustworthy guy or gal. And, you have to testify occasionally, do you not?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I could never imagine why an attorney would use somebody with a felony conviction, because that comes out on cross-examination of the private investigator. Oh, you have a felony conviction. Oh, now there's instructions saying you can't really trust this guy because he's a convicted felon, right? I just don't get why attorneys would do that, but they did.
I have actually, in my 16 years, had multiple attorneys or law firms who told me they had to get a new private investigator because their previous one refused to testify in court. I actually had one that told me their investigator refused to write any reports.
Oh my gosh, how bizarre is that?
And I don't know the reason for that. I can only imagine, but yeah, as you know, what good does it do you?
Yeah, because you're there as an impeachment witness.
Right.
Ethically, attorneys, when we go interview somebody, we can, chat with them, so to speak. But if they say, I'm the real killer, that doesn't do me a whole lot of good if it's just me and that person in the room. I can't get him on the stand and say, well, do you remember talking to me on this day? Yep, sure did. Yeah, we chatted. Didn't you tell me you were the real killer? And they said, no. I mean, you're just there. No, you really did, right? I can't get up and testify.
Right.
I've just made myself a witness to the case. Yep. That's why you always bring an investigator, right? I mean, can't remember how many. We've gone to cases, and even cases today. You take your investigator as a witness to those meetings, so that client never comes back and says you were beating him into submission. He lied to me, because I know it's hard to believe, but sometimes people do that.
Yeah, I mean, and I've had attorneys who have told me, I'm getting you on this case for the specific purpose of sitting in meetings with me to take notes, because clients have come back and said, well, he didn't advise me of how many years I could get in prison, or he didn't tell me that the DA offered me a plea deal. Yeah. So, that's fine if my job is to sit there and take notes.
So be it.
So be it.
Right. Yeah. And it's necessary. And it's sad that that's what it has come to these days, that, nobody trusts anybody kind of in the legal business, that you have to have witnesses and confirming letters and everything to back it up. Otherwise, 6 months, 5 years, 15 years from now, somebody didn't tell me something, and it's the flavor of the month going through the Department of Corrections. I want a new trial. And so you can go back and say, oh, no, here's my investigator's copious notes. Take a look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Right?
Or I'm going to sue you.
Yes.
Yeah. As we've experienced.
We've had that happen once, didn't we?
Have.
And the irony, it was just, we won't go into that, but we had a mutual client that sued, well, I think just about everybody he ever came in contact with, including the judge, the DA, the appellate court judges,
his previous
attorneys. We were just one of many.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, he lost every case. He got 0.
Yep.
And I'm sure some of those copious notes
that came in handy.
Helped indeed. Yes. That's for sure. All right. So let's talk about another thing we were briefly mentioning. The Potter case that's going on right now. That's the police officer who shot the young man. It was a traffic stop, and she used her firearm instead of her taser, and she thought she was going to use the taser. And the defense is basically, it was an accident, and if not, if she used her gun, he was a bad dude, deserved killing. That's really the defense. As well as I do, sometimes you don't have a whole lot in a homicide case other than the dead guy deserved killing, right? You bring up all the bad stuff about him and what have you, and that's kind of where they're going with it. You told me that you used to be a taser instructor. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, you have to get tased to be a taser instructor. I'll start with that. But I also got to tase everybody in my department in order for them to get certified in using the taser. So that was kind of fun. But there's and granted, I haven't been a cop in 16 years. I was there when tasers came out. I was the first instructor in our department. And even then, there was a reason. And that was before any of these accidental shootings had happened or whatever. But even then, we taught our officers, you don't have the holster on your gun side. You know what I mean? Because of the muscle memory thing, you don't want to accidentally draw your firearm when you think you're drawing your holster. Or when you think you're drawing your taser. So, so we made sure it was either in a leg holster down below, so it was a different muscle. It was on the opposite side, so it was a cross draw. And I don't even know if they allow it on the same leg in a leg holster, a thigh holster. I'm not even sure, but there was a reason for that, because you could foresee in a moment of stress what could happen. And I don't personally know that this wasn't the first one, but I would be shocked if this was the first one.
Sure.
And I'm sure, unfortunately, it will not be the last one, because, cops are humans, and humans make mistakes, and especially under stress. And, you train the best that you can, but stress does crazy things to people. And, unless you've been in those situations, And I'm sure it's the same with people in the military, even maybe to a higher degree. But until you've been in those situations, you never know exactly how you're going to react.
Well, exactly. And, I mean, I was never a police officer, but I remember in the military, it's the muscle memory, train, rehearse, all these situations. But then you just never know until that moment actually comes, like, oh my gosh, am I actually going to be able to do it? The Potter case, she's been a police officer for 20 some years. I think she was an instructor. She was the union steward, volunteered for the ceremonial guard. Not what word I'm looking for. The
color guard.
Color guard. Sorry. And they're letting it all in. Like, she was a great cop. I mean, even today, I was watching a portion of it, and her former boss was like, "Oh, she's a great cop," and basically gave the defense everything they wanted on cross-examination. That, yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous situation. The guy was driving away, and so kind of, so what? But it's negligence. Something that's reasonably foreseeable. It's a pretty low standard.
Yeah.
I don't know if the jury will give her a pass or.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is tragedies happen. Just because they're tragic doesn't mean it's not criminal.
Yeah.
And, that's hard for me to say. I mean, I support cops. Let me correct that. I support good cops and good police work. And I think most cops are good and do good police work. And accidents happen.
Yeah.
And by every account, that's exactly what happened here was an accident. I don't know if you saw the videotape, the dash cam or the body cam of her immediately afterwards, but she
was very distraught.
Absolutely distraught. I mean, she immediately realized what she had done, and she was just, just uncontrollably distraught.
Yeah.
And that's sad, but it could still be negligent.
I mean, I can't disagree with you on that. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, the prosecutors, and it's the same prosecutor that prosecuted the case against George Floyd.
The same office, right?
The same office, but the same DA.
Oh, is it really?
Same DA.
That I did not know. Wow.
The same DA, and he's not bad, but there was a guy in Denver years ago. I won't mention any names, but he was the guy that always did the officer incident shooting things. And, he would oftentimes clear the case and, everybody being upright. Oh, the officer was justified. The guy was reaching for a Coca-Cola can when they raided the wrong house and they shot him, stuff like that. Completely justified. But if he had to take a case to trial, like he had the worst record ever, of winning a case. Now, I'm not saying he was, not doing his job, but, I think, he worked primarily with the police for bazillion years before he retired. It's like, okay, I understand. I got to go try the case. Nobody says I got to win it.
Right.
Right.
I think that's part of, and you understand how that happens. I'm not saying I condone that, but I understand how that happens. But I think that's part of this sort of mistrust that we're seeing now too, is who's policing the police. And in those instances, is the prosecutor who has to work directly every day with that, maybe not that officer, but with that police department, that office. Are they really unbiased? Are they looking at that, with an eye not for how can I get this officer out of this, but I guess just like they would look at any other case that's brought to them for consideration of filing. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that because I haven't been in on those, but you can understand why maybe people would be skeptical. Maybe there is a better way to do it.
Yeah. And like I said, I like cops. I mean, there's some great police officers out there, and there's some you get, it's like, oh, Detective so-and-so worked in this case. It's going to be put together really, really well.
Yes.
And then there's others you're like, this guy is terrible. No matter what he did, I'm sure he screwed it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the bad cops. And we've talked about this where there's those cops where, they take it personal. Like, they got to get this guy. And you can't. It's like, I got to get this guy off. He's my client. I didn't create the facts that brought us here together. And I think everyone will say we want good cops. And for the longest time, the problem was the good cops didn't say we need to get rid of the bad cops. They protected them. And I think we're finally starting to get rid of that. Obviously, the classic example is the Derek Chauvin matter. The ones I kind of feel sorry for are the guys that were kind of standing around him. Was the one guy there like day 3 on the job, and next thing you know, he's looking to go into prison for multiple decades, and you're just like, it was Chauvin. I mean, it was Chauvin. Bad guy. I was standing there. Did I let anybody know I was only here for 3 days?
That's a tough position to be in. Every cop will tell you that. And, there's a reason why there's laws on the book about, reporting use of force and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's still really hard to do. And you understand from the day that you're hired, from when you first start going out on the street training with an officer, that my life could be in their hands one day and vice versa. And so that's a really hard step to take. Yeah. And most good cops know it when they see it, and they have to take that step. But they also know that you can get a little bit of a label, and that can have an impact on your career. And that stigma needs to go away in order for, I think, us to get to where we want to go to with professionalism in policing and all that, accountability. That whole stigma needs to go away, and that starts from the top and goes down.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, like you said, you got a guy, he's young. This guy, this veteran is your training officer. Obviously somebody said, listen to whatever this guy says. Whatever he says is going to save your life someday. And so you hope they're the good guys, right?
Right.
And then how do you step in? I mean, do you even know enough to step in at that point? Or do you say, this guy's a legend. He's been around. He's the guy that works overtime, always there, the go-getter, hard charger. But why is, I mean, it's, but, having integrity is doing kind of the hard thing when nobody is watching, or, when it's going to be difficult to do.
Yeah, doing the right thing all the time, not just
when somebody's watching
or when it's easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you realize that when you're the cop and you're making that decision, you realize I could be reporting a senior officer. I could be reporting my supervising officer. There can be huge career ramifications.
Yeah.
People not wanting to work with you, people not trusting you, or even worse.
Yeah.
So those are all considerations that go through a cop's mind. And then, like you said, if you're that new, you don't even know what you're seeing. I mean,
yeah, like, did I even know it was wrong? I mean,
right. Now, the rest of the cops there, I don't believe for a second that, I mean, I can't imagine seeing somebody kneel on somebody's neck for several minutes and not going,
something seems
this doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and it's tough. I remember I had a case, I mean, this was a bazillion years ago, but I had a client, and I remember I walked up and the DA's like, hey, why did you let your client talk to co-defendant's investigator? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because obviously you can't talk to somebody who's represented if you know they have an attorney.
Right.
And so it turns out the attorney told the investigator to go talk to my client. Client talks, what have you. And, the court's like, this needs to be reported. The DA's like, this needs to be reported. And they're all looking at me because it was my client that, has been violated. And there was another attorney that was kind of co-counsel. He just came on. And I looked at him, I knew him, and I had a lot of respect for him. And he had practiced law a lot longer than I had at that point. And he looked at me, he said, Scott, you got to report us. We screwed up. Do what you got to do. And so that makes it a lot easier, but it's easier when everybody's, all in the same, like, we got to do right. We have to police ourselves.
Right.
Attorneys will throw anybody under the bus to get rid of the competition, And I say that jokingly, but not so much. I mean, it's, attorneys can be brutal to one another. And, it's a lot easier with police officers, I guess, if everybody's saying, hey, and, like in today's world, it's a lot easier because it's all in body cam.
Well, and that you're right, and actually that, I think, it takes a lot of that decision away from officers because it's been recorded. So now if you don't do it, you got no one to blame but yourself.
Yep.
Not only is it required by the law, but it's going to come out what really happened, that you were there, that you saw it, that you didn't report. I mean, your career is going to be over anyway. So it takes that decision, completely out of their hands, I think, or at least it should. So I think the body cams are a great thing, and I think most good cops would feel the same way, because most good cops know, hey, all these BS allegations that I get about use of force or whatever, this is going to show that I didn't do that I did the right thing. And I think most cops feel that way. I really do.
Yeah, I can tell. I was just, even a couple of weeks ago, I went down to meet with a police officer, and it's one of those car things, like, oh, come down, client gonna make a statement? Nope. But the detective said, hold on. So we're walking out to inspect the vehicle so it doesn't get picked up on the side of the road one day. And he says, hey, just to let you know, I got my body cam on. I'm recording everything. I'm like, that's okay. I'm not going to say anything. This, whatever. And he goes, yeah. He goes, just do it. Saves me a lot of hassle. I'm like, I get it. Yep. I prefer it. The only thing I don't like about body cams is you have to watch every minute of them. It is
right,
brutal sometimes.
It is going to be unbelievably time consuming. It's going to be incredibly expensive, not just for the police agencies to get the programs up and running, but for public defenders' offices to come up with a way to have the manpower to, we do some state contract work. I mean, that's an agency that's going to have to figure out how they're going to pay for all that, because it's, a case that maybe took 15 hours to review all the discovery before, you might have 50 hours of just body cam footage.
Yep.
On a homicide scene, it's not unusual in Denver to have 35 officers, detectives, criminalists, whatever. I mean, if all of those are turning body cam on and off, or even just walking around for 5 hours with it on, all that has to be reviewed, or we're negligent in our job.
Yep. And the only thing that is even worse than watching body cam video of the same thing over and over again is listening to wiretap phone calls. That is the worst. But you have to listen. That's what people don't get when they say, we turned over the discovery. Well, Judge, this is going to take me a year to do because I got to listen to everything.
Right.
Or I got to pay somebody to summarize it.
Yep. Or jail phone calls, your client's jail phone calls. And you hear, hey, what's up? Nothing, what's up? And then you listen to 25 minutes of
gibberish.
That. Right. Because, again, you have to.
Yeah, because what if he says something obviously bad, or what if he says something good
that you didn't catch?
Yep. It was right there.
There's an appeal.
You have to. I think people just don't appreciate. People see, a trial on TV, which I think is absolutely great. I think there should be cameras in the courtrooms. I think there should be cameras in like most public offices saying, "Here's what we're doing all day."
Yep. I do too.
And I really think it's important in the court for all the proceedings. Why shouldn't the public be able to see what's going on? We're not living, 1800, early 1900. Right. We have technology now where there is a camera in just about every courtroom, at least for like security purposes, mm-hmm. right? You can block out the jury. You can block out, people that you don't want to see. But literally, all right, we're on the record. Turn on the camera.
Yep.
It's for the whole world to see.
Right. And then there's not even a question. Then there's not, did the court reporter transcribe this correctly or whatever? Everything's recorded.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember some people absolutely hated me. We were talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse case. And some people, I was like, listen, if somebody like, this kid, he was a racist, he had guns, blah, blah, blah. A lot of things that turned out false, and I think he's going to sue a lot of people. But I tell most people, you got to, or I tell all people, you got to respect the decision of the jury. You may not like it, but they're making the best decision they can with the information they had and the law that was given to them by the judge. All right. And the Rittenhouse case, I was like, I watched that thing all the way through. And early on, I was like, oh, this kid's screwed, And then I had a subscriber who sent me like, here's the breakdown, boom. And I was like, wow, they had all this stuff. I didn't realize they had all this other cell phone video they were able to collect and whatever. And it showed him being, chased and knocked down. And I'm like, he's got a shot. And then you see the trial, and it was just like, it's going to be not guilty, ladies and gentlemen. But at least the world can go back and watch every minute of that trial, from jury selection, every question, Obviously, didn't get to see a jury deliberation, but you could see how the jury came to their conclusion. And that's why I think it's so important, particularly on these high-profile trials. It needs to be aired for everybody to see.
And that is also a perfect example of why a defense team needs to go through all the footage.
Yep.
Because the footage that the prosecution used, or at least some of it, was only excerpts.
Yeah.
And it did not paint the full picture of everything that had gone on. And so I'm going to toot my own horn here. That's why I think every defense attorney needs a good defense investigator.
Absolutely.
Because you have to make sure you've gone to the ends of the earth to collect everything that's out there and to go through everything that's out there. And, maybe none of it helps your client.
Yeah.
But maybe some of it does. Maybe one thing does. And if you didn't do that, then you did at the very least, you did a disservice to your client.
Well, and that's what, going back to the facts, usually there's not this great case. That one case that may get the case thrown out or, motion for evidence to be suppressed is going to come down to the facts. And where are you going to find those facts? Out, going, talking to everything, walking the scene. Yep. I mean, remember that triple attempted homicide case we did? How many times did we go out and walk the scene and go talk to random people? Did you hear anything? What'd you see?
Right.
Just walking it like, okay, here's this, and it worked out well for our client.
And found out there were about 7 homes in the area with cameras that were never mentioned in police reports.
And nobody went and got them.
Nobody collected them.
And people don't get this. We've mentioned this on the show before, is that it's an adversarial system. Everyone thinks the prosecutor's job is to do justice, right? Well, if we're seeking justice, I should never have to get up and ask a single question, because the DA is going to present all the evidence that not only is favorable to them, but they're going to present all the evidence that is favorable to the defense.
Right.
No, that's not the way it works. Prosecution only presents the evidence that's favorable to the prosecution. Right. It's the defense job to present the evidence that's favorable to the defense, the defendant. And that doesn't happen by just relying on the prosecutor.
Well, and in fact, it goes back I think it even goes back further than that, because, cops are human. And what you see a lot of times is a cop, again, they're human. They make up their mind about what happened. And so they tend to investigate it from the perspective of proving their theory.
Yep.
And so in doing that, maybe they dig up everything, but maybe they don't. Maybe there's certain things they're not even looking for, whether it's intentionally or not. And again, since it's an adversarial system, first, I agree with you. I would like to think that the only goal is justice, but I know that's a little bit naive.
Yeah.
But that's where our job comes in. We have to make sure that all the facts are presented, not just the facts, in the light most favorable to the prosecution.
Yeah, and I've had good DAs.
Sure.
There was a DA out in Adams County. He was great. It was a legitimate issue, right? And normally they say, well, if you go to motions hearing, the offer's withdrawn. And we had a really good judge. I think it was Judge Warner, who was, he was a former police officer, prosecutor, and a judge. Mm-hmm. And I think I did one of his last trials before he became a judge. It was he and Sean May did a trial together.
Yep.
And unfortunately, Sean May was a prosecutor who was assassinated by somebody at his home, returning home from work that night, which is absolute.
Still unsolved.
Still unsolved.
Yep.
And, his wife
Corinne
is a judge, a municipal court judge, and friends on Facebook, and every year it's the Sean May. He was a great guy. He was just a good guy. But anyway, I digress. And we were in front of Judge Warner, and told Dad, like, listen, it's a legitimate issue. I said, but it could go either way. He goes, you know what? You're right. It's a legitimate issue. Let the chips fall where they may. We had a motions hearing. Client got his fair shake. We didn't win the motions hearing, but and my client could have gone to trial and lost and appealed and whatever. But he had his day in court. Right. It's like let the evidence be out there. And the Judge Warner, did a fabulous job of explaining the law and the decision that he came up to. And the client was satisfied with that. And the DA said, Judge, it was good for us to do this so that, if the police didn't do it right, so be, right? That's the way the system works, to suppress the evidence if the police overstep their bounds. And the court found that they didn't. But at least the client had his basically moment in court. He wanted his side aired for the public to hear. And that's all he wanted. And sometimes I think prosecutors don't get that. And that judge, Judge Warner said, hey, this is good. This is okay. And he goes, he gave a little shout out to the DA saying, if there's legitimate issues, keep that offer open. I mean, that's doing justice.
Right.
And Mark Warner was a great prosecutor. He was very fair. I mean, I thought he was. I mean, he'd been there, done that. Like, hey, this isn't the crime of the century. I'll give you a misdemeanor. Yeah.
He was very even keeled and just he never got worked up, and
That's why I think he's been a good judge too.
Yep.
He's just even keeled.
Yep, I agree.
And I don't know. He's a good judge, but sometimes we were talking about prosecutors that are they're erring in favor of the prosecutors. I've had them say, I know this case sucks. The cop probably stepped over the line, but he's got to plead guilty to something because they know there's a lawsuit coming. And I don't do those. I'm not advising my client to go, sue the officer. But that's what they're looking out for, in the sense of, well, we don't want the city to get sued. We don't want the cop to get sued.
And I get that, because they're on the same team, if you will, like they're kind of looking out for each other. But again, that's not their job. And
exactly
that's I think sometimes that's what's frustrating, and that's, I think, part of what lends to this kind of current culture of distrust with police and prosecutors and the whole system in general is, well, they're all working together. And I mean, yes, they are, but they all have independent, specific jobs. And if they just worried about their job and did their job the right way, the way they're supposed to, and then let everybody else do their job the way they're supposed to, I think the system would work exactly the way it's meant to.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, and that's why I think, like I said, some people wouldn't be wrong if they think the police and the prosecutor and the judge are all working together, because there's some that have never granted a motion to suppress in their entire 30 years on the bench, never saw police officers that ever did anything wrong. And I've said this before, and probably not to you, but one of the reasons why we sometimes have bad cops that get to stay in the system is that you get prosecutors that look at it. They see that guy that keeps coming back with the same circumstances over and over again. The judge sees it, but yet they are almost protecting the police officer, which only encourages the bad behavior. So, like you said, if everybody did their job, and every now and then, listen, everybody makes mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Police officers are not completely infallible. They make mistakes. And there's nothing wrong with a prosecutor to have to say that, right?
Right.
I say it all the time to my clients. Man, you screwed up. You confess. What do you want me to do with this, right? I mean, I mean, there's only so much I can do. And there's nothing wrong with a prosecutor telling a cop, like, hey, you crossed the line on this one. And I'm gonna dismiss it, and hopefully it just goes away. Right?
Well, and equally important is that a judge needs to be able to say to a prosecutor, you made a mistake.
Yeah.
You didn't give them all the discovery.
Yeah.
You whatever it might be. And it's sort of the kid reaching for the cookies all the time. You know what I mean? If you never slap their hand, they're going to keep reaching for the cookies, and they're going to do it more. And again, I'm not saying all of that stuff is intentional. It maybe it's not the mistake that the cop is making or the mistake that the prosecutor is making. Maybe it's not, but if they're not corrected, they're just going to keep doing it.
Like, they could be completely oblivious. And you don't have to mention names, but we were talking about a situation where a police officer didn't think if there wasn't anything good for the prosecution, he didn't have to turn a tape over. And
right,
that's called exculpatory evidence that the prosecution has to do. And you were telling me, why don't you tell a story? But it sounds like, he was oblivious. He just didn't know. Maybe he didn't miss that day of class.
Yeah. Early on in my career, we got our first ever LEAF grant, Law Enforcement Assistance Fund, which is from the state, and typically that's used for DUI enforcement. And so I was our first dedicated DUI officer. I Didn't particularly like doing them, but it was a better shift, so that's why I volunteered to do it. And then I did it for 3 or 4 months, and then the officer after me that did it. And one night after making a DUI arrest, and he was finishing up paperwork and so forth, and I asked him where the VHS tape was. We still had VHS tapes then. It was in the trunk of the car.
That's dating both of us, because
Yeah.
I still have boxes in storage of VHS tapes from interviews.
Wow. Yeah, that's old
Because
school.
that's how you used to get them, right?
Right.
You had to put them in the.
Yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
TV with the VHS player I had in my office to watch it. Now it's all on disc.
Yeah, and so I asked him where that was, and he said, there was nothing helpful to the case on there, so he wasn't booking it in. And to try to have that conversation about you have to book it in, and like I told you when I was telling you the story, he said nobody told me that, and I believe him, but that's just wow, that's so basic, you know. So again, if somebody isn't addressing that, it's just gonna keep happening.
Yeah,
And if somebody is addressing it and it keeps happening, then something more severe needs to happen.
exactly. So obviously, in the last 2.5 years, there's been a big focus on policing, changing the police dynamics, so to speak. Maybe that's not the right word. Let's defund the police. There are a lot of people that said defund the police after George Floyd, and I think that same jurisdiction that they put it to a vote, and the voters said, "Oh no, don't do that. We're keeping the police." Right. I mean, what's your general thought? I know you haven't been a police officer for a while, but I mean, would you want to be a police officer today?
No, and I wouldn't want anybody that I care about to be a police officer. But that's not just today. I mean, I felt that way for a long time after I left police work shortly after I left police work, and I felt that way ever since. But it's even more so now, and it's for a lot of reasons. It's a tough job. It's kind of a miserable job. Almost every single person you're dealing with every day, that's the worst thing that's happened in their day, and it might be the worst thing that's happened in their week or their month or their year or their life. And it's just not a great job. And I know everybody's gonna say, "Oh, boo-hoo!" What? It's just not. It's a tough job, and it's not for everybody. But I guess having said that, I'm pro law enforcement. I know I'm a defense investigator, but I'm pro law enforcement, pro good law enforcement, professional law enforcement.
I think everybody is,
right. And I want to know that if something's happening in my neighborhood or in my house or whatever, that when I call, there's going to be somebody there. And what we ask police officers to do, not all the time every day, I'm not saying that, but some of the things that police officers have to do, some of the things that we expect them to do, there's nobody else in our society that's willing to do that.
Yeah. Like I said, they get to deal with the worst of the worst on a daily basis. Yep. Be insulted, second-guessed, spat at, people trying to literally kill them on a daily basis.
I had 2 different times in my career I had people throw their feces at me.
Yeah, I mean, who does that, right? I don't get it. And I'm sure you've had people that, let's face it, probably street fights, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
And it's not like everybody goes to their ring corners and come out, touch gloves and do it. I mean, they're trying to hurt you or to get away or
trying to kill you. So they can get away. Yeah. I mean, until you've had somebody put their hand on your gun and you can feel them, like you can feel it's yanking at the belt. I mean, it's damn near pulling you off the ground. And that, oh shit, realization that if he gets my gun, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like that's a feeling that probably not a lot of people in our society can describe. And, I wasn't in a lot of fights growing up, but I was in a couple, and, it's different. You knew if you lost the fight, you weren't going to be killed.
Yeah.
And I do understand times are different, and, even schoolyard fights probably aren't the same, but, that was something I had never experienced before. And again, there's just things that we, as you and I talked about earlier, we don't pay our cops to fight evenly. We don't pay our cops to survive the fight. We pay our cops to win the fight.
Yeah.
Because they have to, for the good of our society, of our civilization.
Yeah.
And we have to have people that are willing to go out and do that job, knowing what people think of them, knowing what our society thinks, knowing what could happen to them. Because if we don't, then what?
Well, and that's what I mean, and you should see some of the comments I get when I say this stuff, is that I mean, you have to be prepared to take care of yourself in today's world, right?
Yes.
And I mean, there's people leaving the police forces. Their budgets are shrinking, and they're probably going to be shrinking. Tax revenue, all that stuff goes down. I mean, their budgets ebb and flow with tax revenue. But the police are pretty reactive. It's not like they're, hey, we got an idea. There's going to be something going on your street corner tonight, and we're going to be there to stop it. Maybe in the investigation stuff, right? But most of the stuff is reactive. Somebody broke into my house. Get here quickly. Oh, what are you going to do in the meantime until somebody gets there? The police there to take the photographs of the scene. Oh, sorry, didn't get here quick enough. I mean, at the end of the day, you still have to take care of yourself. There's only so many, they try to say like one police officer for every 10,000 people or something. I mean, there are just simply not enough people. If there's,
I think the goal is 1 per 1,000.
1 per 1,000. Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
That's still 1,000 people. I mean, that's one police officer for all of that, and
And that doesn't mean they're all working at that time.
they're not working at that time.
No.
They could have days off for training. They could have vacation time. They're sick that day. They're out for an injury because they got into a guy that was resisting arrest that just hurt his back. I mean,
when I started as a police officer, there was about 20,000 people in the town where I worked, and there were nights because of vacation or sick time where there were 2 of us on duty overnight. Normally on a normal night there was supposed to be 4, but there would be times there would be 2, which is just unbelievably dangerous.
yeah.
But
I mean, you went 2 cops at a DUI stop.
oh yeah, you want a minimum of 2 at a DUI.
Let alone you got some drunk guy, beating up his wife that may have a gun inside. Right.
And all that, you were talking about the reactive versus proactive. I mean, the goal for a long time for police was to be proactive, to stop things before it happened. One, that's incredibly difficult to do. But 2, as budgets shrink, as things that used to take an officer maybe 2 hours to do because of different statutory requirements and things, now it might take 3 or 4 hours. Things just slow down, and as budgets shrink, and through attrition, police forces shrink. I mean, there's just less and less of that, and so it is reactive. And I mean, there was a article in the Denver Post not long ago. It talked about, and I don't remember the number, but I was shocked at the average call response time. And we're not talking about a cold bicycle theft. I mean, we're talking about a burglary in progress and stuff like that. And I mean, it was 12 minutes or 15 minutes or something. And so yeah, you're right. Number 1, you better be prepared to take care of yourself. But number 2, it's a lot of the things that cops used to do to be proactive, that's part of what society is saying we don't want cops to do. And the biggest example I can think of is the Terry stop.
Yep.
I was trained, and I always thought it was fantastic police work if, I saw it was 2 a.m. and again, the town where I worked was small enough, and you usually work the same district. I knew what cars were supposed to be where at certain times. I knew generally who was supposed to be in certain places. And there's just sometimes you see something and you think, that looks a little out of place. A good cop
go check it out.
Is going to go check it out, and you're going to ask questions. And do you have reasonable suspicion to stop them, to ask questions, or is it just a consensual stop? Hey guys, what you doing? If they say F you, well, then it's a consensual stop. So you got to let them walk away. But even the requirement now about, if a cop even does that, and I don't know if it's, I'm trying to remember whether it's, I don't believe it's state law yet, but the requirement that they have to document the race and the, all the different things of every person. I mean, even that is taking so much time that then you're taking the cop off the street. So what it's telling cops is we don't want you to do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
We just want you to sit in your car, sit in your office, wait till we call you, and then hurry up and get here.
Yeah. You mentioned a good point. Paperwork.
Ugh.
I mean, I know that's what we do. We create paperwork now. As a police officer, did you create a lot of paperwork?
Oh my God, it was just unbelievable. And so much of it is just redundant.
Yeah.
You know, and I understand the need for it. Absolutely, I do. But, you know, a run-of-the-mill DUI or domestic violence arrest, and I say that because that is a very frequent, normal call for police officers.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to be 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And so,
which is when you're filling out the paperwork. I mean, that's not the time on this. That's just the paperwork afterwards.
Yeah, you're sitting at the desk doing that, so you could book that person into jail or whatever, and so that 2.5 hours, that officer's out of service.
Yep.
And so if there were 6 officers on the street, now you're down to 5, and then you have one that's on an injury, probably 2 that are on an injury crash. Now you're down to 3, and it's just there's a constant need, and there's a million reasons why. You know, people always complain. Have you ever seen that app Nextdoor?
Sure.
There's a lot of people in my neighborhood that complain, well, I haven't seen a cop drive by in 3 weeks. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's not just because they're sitting in the Taco Bell parking lot eating their lunch. I mean, there's so many other things that we require them to do. The amount of time they have to just drive around and do proactive patrol. I mean, there's a certain amount of crime that's prevented just because somebody sees a police car.
Sure.
You can never document that or quantify that, but there absolutely is. So, you know, the more and more paperwork that we expect them to do or require them to do, the more time it takes them off the street, the less time you're going to see them out patrolling.
And don't forget now, downloading body cam videos.
Oh yeah, downloading
because that doesn't just miraculously happen.
No,
they have to take it out. I think they dock it, or there's a disk system. And they have to download it for each contact, for each case file. I mean,
oh yeah, it has to be.
They save it now.
A case number associated with it, if there is, and even if there's not, they still have to. You know, all that has to get uploaded and booked in at the end of the shift, just in case. What if there's a complaint?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, everything takes. I mean, they have to document what their patrol car looks like at the beginning of their shift. Like they have to go around, look at it, make sure there's not damage. I mean, again, I understand the reason for it. I'm just saying there's a lot of reasons that people might not understand why you don't see cops out on the street.
And I think a lot of it has to do with just our society as things have changed. People, you used to always hear about doctors. You know, they're running unnecessary tests that the doctors know aren't necessary, but they have to do it. And the reason they were doing it was a CYA thing. You know, they were covering their butt that if, you know, to rule stuff out because they didn't want to get sued by somebody if they were wrong. So police officers have to dot every I, cross every T, just like attorneys and investigators do. Sure. Because, you know, what if there's a complaint down the road? What if you have to have documentation? And for lack of a better term, if it's not on a piece of paper somewhere or video, it didn't happen.
Yep.
And, you know, you can say, well, I had that conversation with that client and he told me to do this. And the client says, no, I didn't. And if you don't have it, guess what? It didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Even though your guy is a career criminal and, you know, you've never had an issue before, like attorney regulation is going to say, well, you know, you should have documented it better. You knew better.
As you well know, we even now have a form that I have the client sign when I go through discovery with them, because we've even been accused of that before where, well, you didn't go through my discovery. You didn't show me those videos.
Yep. Well, okay. And yeah, if there's 8,000 pages and they want to watch it, they're entitled to watch everything.
They're entitled to watch it.
Sometimes you think, okay,
yeah,
you were there.
You know, okay. I tell people it all pays the same. And, you know, if that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do.
I get it. I mean, it's a necessary job to make sure the client understands
sure
their options. It just seems like, and it kind of goes back to what, you know, you said, would a family member, would you recommend somebody go to be a police officer? It's kind of like my kids, you know, gee, Dad, should I go to law school? I wouldn't. I think there's much easier ways with a lot less stress to make a living.
Or if you do, be a water rights attorney.
Yeah, be water rights attorney for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a different world. What are your thoughts about what we're seeing in the world, like these smash and grabs? What do you think's cause of this?
I mean, the cause is people believing they're not going to be held accountable.
I agree.
That's the bottom line. And whether that's because of laws we've enacted, whether that's because of certain store policies, whether it's because we've reduced the number of police officers, it's probably all of the above. But they know they're not going to be held accountable. They're not even going to be held in jail overnight. There's no cash bond anymore. So, they're, you know, I don't know if you saw the recent article in the Denver Gazette, fascinating article. It was a study done. I don't remember what the name of the consortium was, but it was led by Mitch Morrissey and George Brockler.
Okay.
So Republican and Democrat.
Both former district attorneys. And Mitch Morrissey was a Democrat, but he's a tough on crime kind of guy. He's not, let's give everybody a group hug. I mean, hell, I've seen Mitch Morrissey go, you know, nose to nose before he was, you know, the elected DA with defense counsel. Like, you know, I did the, you know,
but still a registered Democrat.
Yeah.
So it wasn't
he's always
just,
been, his whole family is.
Yeah. So this wasn't just a conservative study or anything like that, but, you know, it was talking about, it said that since 2011, I believe, the prison population in Colorado has gone down 23%. The crime rate has gone up 47%. And it talked about 61% of people booked into jail in Denver were released on either no cash bond at all, or in some cases a $1 or $2 cash bond. Again, I know maybe it sounds strange coming from somebody that does mostly defense work, but, you know, so you're asking me, why are we getting these kind of smash and grabs and things like that? That all plays into it. It's no accountability.
It's no accountability. And as a criminal defense attorney, I love we're going to give your client a PR bond, even though he's, you know, allegedly shot people, or, you know, and I exaggerate on that. Maybe they wouldn't do that but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and you're sitting there thinking, I'm a greatest attorney ever. Got him a PR bond. This is great. And then you're thinking, as a member of the community, oh my God, I hope this guy doesn't harm somebody. You know, I mean, some of the stuff, the pendulum has just swung so far. Yes. And the problem with that is sometimes it swings back too far the other direction, and the goal of common sense that I think people were striving for and hoping for then gets lost in the extreme of both sides. Some people think no one should ever go to jail. No one should ever live in a cage and blah, blah, blah. And other people are like, you know, lock them up, you know. And there's something in between.
Sure there is.
Right?
And we're seeing the other end of that pendulum. I mean, the drug sentencing laws and stuff that we got in the late 80s and early 90s,
sure.
What that was the pendulum on the other side. And so, you know, maybe now we're seeing it swing back. But yeah, I agree with you. Common sense would dictate somewhere in the middle is probably the right thing. Yeah. But again, I mean, I would like to know how many of those people are advocating for, you know, no cash bonds and things like that have ever been the victim of a burglary, or had their car stolen out of their driveway, or had their car broken into in the middle of the night, or, you know, whatever it might be. Yeah. Again, I realize that I do mostly defense work, but I'm still for law and order.
I think, well, and as am I. I mean, I'm a firm believer in law and order. You cannot have chaos.
Right.
But you can't have police officers violating people's constitutional rights, which
correct.
I don't think most police officers get up and say, you know, I think I'm going to violate some rights today. I think they're trying to go about, do their job, do it well, do good. I think most people that want to be police officers do it for the right reason, which is, you know, they'll serve and protect, right? There's a few that, you know, I got to beat up people like I did in high school kind of thing.
Or I got beat up in high school.
Exactly.
And now I'm going to beat back.
Yeah. Well, there's prosecutors like that too.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure.
You know, that power thing. You got to be careful sometimes of people of, you know, what they're looking for in power. But yeah, you got to have law and order. You can't, you know, have somebody, you know, if the kid takes the cookie from the cookie jar, first time, okay, maybe it's a warning. Second time, hey, did you not get it? You're going to go stand in timeout. You know, third time, maybe you're going to get a swat on the hand or a swat on the bottom. Mm-hmm. Nothing abuse, but, you know, let them know, like, hey, we're serious. Now we're taking the cookie jar away. Mm-hmm. But when there's no consequences, you're just going to get more of what you tolerate.
Absolutely.
And it's, for lack of a better term, coming home to roost in, California, these smash and grabs. I mean, these organized criminal enterprises
Yep.
where people are going in and, I mean, if you're a store owner, why would you want to keep a store in San Francisco, LA, if you know whatever you put out, somebody's just going to come in and take, and there's not a damn thing that you can do about it?
Well, then, and there was, studies and statistics after the George Floyd riots last summer about how many businesses were not going to reopen.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that, because at that point there was no end in sight. I've actually been pleasantly surprised that there hasn't been some of the same reactions like after the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict.
Yeah.
Or at least not nearly to the degree. Obviously, with former Officer Potter in Minnesota, that's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
The Arbery case down in, was that Georgia?
Yeah, Georgia was the Arbery case. But once again, there's no rioting in that one because...
Well, the verdict was what I think most people thought the verdict should have been.
Yeah, and boy, did I get grief on that one. That case, that was the case where the neighbors see Mr. Arbery running through the neighborhood. And now, whether he was running or doing whatever, the bottom line is they didn't see him commit any crime.
Right.
And whether he was going through a house that was under construction, I don't know if he was scoping it out, whatever. That's their story, and they're sticking to it, right? But in the Arbery case, they go and they track this guy down. And it's not just like, hey, what are you doing? Stay here till the police get here. It was they chased him around the neighborhood. They cornered him. The son, I think it's Travis McMichaels, gets out, confronts him with a shotgun, shoots him not once, 3 shots fired, I think 2 hit, kills Mr. Arbery there in the street. And the dad, Travis, I think it's Gary McMichaels, he was a former police officer, former DA investigator. So the DAs look at it and like, oh, he's a dangerous, dangerous man. He had a juvenile history for stealing a television, something along those lines. Or I think he had a gun as a juvenile as well. But he didn't have one that day. And everyone said, well, they're making a citizen's arrest. So I did what people do. I went and pulled the law. And I got so much grief. And it always cracks me up. Because some people, there's a lot of people these days that pick a side based upon whatever political affiliation they want. Well, this is the right way. We don't like Kyle Rittenhouse because, we think he, is whatever. We think these guys down here, they're doing the right thing. Well, if you look at it, you're like, they hunted this kid down. They got out. They shot him. And the video, I mean, I don't know. Most people don't realize the video that was shot by
the co-defendant,
Roddy Williams, was it William Roddy Williams, I think is his last name. He shoots this video of the whole thing kind of going down and kind of in and out of the picture, so to speak. Well, he apparently had given that to his attorney. The attorney somehow thought that was a good idea to turn it over to a radio station who puts it up on its website, that the whole thing goes viral, and everyone's like, yeah, this is totally against the law. Like, this is bad news. And it didn't take much, if you just read the law, that the whole citizen's arrest thing wasn't going to work, because they had to see him committing a felony of a particular type. Mm-hmm. Wasn't, and burglary, trespassing wasn't one of the requisites, And it was just, I mean, if I was that attorney, I'd be calling my malpractice carrier.
Well,
or I'd make sure I had the client's permission in writing to turn that over, thinking it's going to help the case.
You talked about a moment ago about we can't have chaos. You're right, and chaos is also vigilante justice going on.
Yeah,
it's people taking the law into their own hands. It's rogue cops saying the ends justify the means. I mean, all of that is chaos.
Yep.
And if you're talking about taking a political side, I guess if one side is going to say, well, the vigilante justice was okay in this reason or in this instance because Arbery stole a television when he was a kid, or because he had a gun when he was a kid. Well, that's the same kind of logic that was applied to George Floyd. And well, it was okay to kneel on his neck for 9 minutes because he passed a counterfeit $20 bill and because he had these prior arrests. I mean, either it's legal or it's not legal. And it doesn't matter that afterwards we found out this person was a bad person or this person was a good person or what. And it's the same, to me, it's the same with police work. If if you're a good cop and you're doing things the right way for the right reason, you're going to be okay almost all the time. Accidents happen, mistakes happen, whatever. But when you get these cops that, like I said, the ends justifies the means, because I know he's a bad guy, because he's been a bad guy before, because I'm going to put him away, then they're really not any better
than the criminal.
Exactly. They're deciding that they can do whatever they want to do, and their rationale makes it okay.
Yep.
It's the same thing.
I hear you. It's yeah. I mean, you can't become what you despise.
Right.
Right. Oh, I hate the career criminal. I'm going to go get him. But it's okay for me to break the law if I'm going to get the criminal. Right. No, I mean, in my experience is the good cops, they get him anyway.
Eventually.
Right? Eventually. It may not be today, may not be tomorrow.
Right.
But they're going to get him.
And why on earth would you risk your career for somebody that you know you're going to see again in 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever?
Yeah, they'll be back.
Or even if you're not going to see them.
Yep.
It's don't take it personal.
I tell this to every attorney that's ever worked for me and staff, and I say, listen, never met a client worth going to jail for, and I've never been paid enough money to jeopardize my law license.
Amen.
Bottom line. And the cops should look at that as well. Like, never met a person worth going to prison for or losing my job about. It'll be good. You know, if he's doing the stuff, you may not get him today, but guess what? You'll get him eventually.
Yep.
You know,
or some other cop will.
Yep. You know, put it in there and document it, and
yep,
he'll be known. He'll get cocky because he got away with it,
mm-hmm.
and you know that's just the way it usually works out.
And I'm sure, you know, I'm 16 years removed from it, and I'm probably a little bit older. Well, I know I'm a lot older, a little bit wiser. I don't know if I always saw it the same way. I mean, I like to think that I was a pretty good cop, but, you know, I'm sure I have no doubt there were things that I did that people probably questioned also. I know I never intentionally did, you know, never stepped over that line intentionally. You know, I understand how, you know, you're in a chaotic, stressful situation and you know, remember back to the Rodney King days and the whole, you know, contempt of cop is what we called it, about how dare you, I'm going to teach you, you know, the adrenaline, whatever, you're coming down off of that and you lose control. I mean, they even talk to you about that. They train you about how to deal with that and how not to let that happen and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I get it. It's, again, we're all human and there are human reactions, but there's just some things you simply cannot do.
Yeah, I had a guy I knew back in the Marines, and we were both in the reserves, but he had come back in, you know, for something to do, a little excitement in his life, I guess, and he had gone to Vietnam, got out, became a Denver cop, and he used to say, man, back in the old days, you know, walking up with the billy club and just whacking somebody in the back of the head or pulling them through the car window. You know, and this was, 30 years ago, and he said nobody had any respect for police. I can only imagine his head exploding now. But, you know, you sit there and you're just like, but you can't do that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but that's just the way it was. There was no body cam. There were no security cameras. Yeah, it's not like who's going to have a tape recorder record it. You know, tape recorder was the size of this computer, right? It just wasn't going to happen. And, you know, I think that fostered a lot of what people had to, you know, or it created that culture, so to speak. But I really think, and this is just me, and some people say, oh, no, Scott, you're like I said, I think most cops are good. I really do. And there are some that I wouldn't want looking for my dog if, you know, she was missing. But there's some that if I knew that something had happened to my family member, I'd want them working that case.
Well, I've had this, as I told you, I was at funerals 2 of the last 3 days and with people I used to work with. And I had a conversation with a guy who's still a cop. I used to supervise him, and we were talking, and I said, you know, there's 2 different kinds of cops. There's the kind of cop that puts in a 35-year career and just kind of punches the clock and, you know, says the right things, and you know what I mean? And then there's the kind of cop that if you hear somebody trying to get into your house at 3 a.m. that you want coming to your house, those are not necessarily the same kind of cop.
Yep.
And it's maybe sad, but it's absolutely true that one of those is far more likely to have a long career than the other, and one of those is far more likely to, find themselves on a video or whatever on social media or on the news. And I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, if I got to call the police at 3 a.m, I know what type of cop I want responding.
You want the by God no shit gunfighter that's going to show up and
do what needs to be done.
Do what needs to be done.
Yep.
Not the guy. Well, we need to follow police protocol at this particular juncture and wait for backup. And you want the guy who's going to come in and make sure, get the bad guy.
Right. And again, I understand how that looks and how that sounds, but there's a certain personality, if you will, or a certain type of cop that you just know is going to take care of business, the job that needs to be done, and it might look ugly. In fact, it is going to look ugly. There's a lot of things that we ask cops to do that just if it's on video, it just doesn't look good.
Yeah. I mean, pulling people's arms behind their back, putting the knees in their backs to, get them cuffed and stuff like that. Yeah, it looks like something from a UFC fight or something.
And absolutely. And that's why, there needs to be transparency and there needs to be accountability. So when those lines are crossed, the public needs to know about it and people need to be held accountable, which is no different than what we would be saying about a criminal. We're talking about lack of holding people accountable and resulted in some of the crime statistics and stuff we're seeing now. If we should hold criminals accountable, why shouldn't we hold cops accountable that do wrong?
Yeah.
So, but, again, that's why body cams could be so important, because it's very quick, very easy to identify who the good cops are, who the bad cops are, if there's, or the cops that need better training, or the cops that need, whatever. I shouldn't say just bad cops, but if I was a chief of police, I would want those for my guys, because I know that 99% of the time it's going to show that what we did was right, and it's going to save us a lawsuit. And then that 1% of the time when it's going to cost us a lawsuit, then I don't want that guy on my force anyway.
Yeah, because at a certain point, these jurisdictions have got to say, man, this is getting expensive. I don't know how much money Denver forks out, but, we're not talking a few $100 here and there. Oh. We're usually talking, 7 figures, like $6-7 million or more when these police officers are screwing up, and I get it, they get the benefit of the doubt, but if they screw the pooch, man, they got to pay for it, but it's the citizens that wind up paying for it.
Sure it is. It's taxpayers. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you have those few cops that acted illegally or unethically or whatever, that then that label gets attached to every other cop. And so although I understand the culture, I would hope that it's finally time and that it's come far enough that cops would say, listen, I don't want to be associated with those bad cops. If we identify them, we need to get rid of them.
Yeah. And
that's where the reporting laws and stuff like that, need to make sure that that's happening.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. A couple questions here about being a private eye. Can you hack computers?
I can't. It's not what I do.
But there's people, investigators, forensic people that can do all that, right?
Yeah, I know people that, the software that police detectives normally use, the forensic software for examining phones and computers. I know private investigators
that's all they do.
That they have that software and that's all they do. So, yeah, there's private investigators that can do that, absolutely.
Cell phones. Would you have ever thought that cell phones were going to provide so much information, good or bad, in criminal cases?
They're a gold mine, just like video.
Yeah, and most people don't know. This stuff, there's so many apps running in the background on your phone. It's listening to you, you start talking about, I was talking about I had to get something done out at the airplane hangar. Next thing you know, I started getting ads on Facebook of all these concrete, sealer people. It's just, how did that happen, right?
Yeah.
And then we get a dump on a cell phone. It's like it takes up
hundreds of pages.
A terabyte. It's thousands of pages, like 62,000 pages.
Yep.
I think when we went through it, we just got, and I'm just like, how many hours is this going to take to go through? And you got to look, and sometimes you got to hire an expert to go look because you don't even know what you're looking for. How do you know what you don't know?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times it's just series of numbers and letters that they're not words. They're just, I don't know if it's code. I don't exactly know. Yeah, you got to hire somebody that knows what all that is. But you're right. I mean, anybody who's ever sat in their living room at night and had a conversation with their wife or their kid about going to Yellowstone for vacation, and then the next day you have ads for Yellowstone, and you have, airline ads to, fly into the airport, whatever it is. I mean, clearly your phone is listening, your tablet is listening. Even the computers in cars, as you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
my car suggests to me my desired location first thing in the morning and going home at night.
Oh yeah. And if you use a nav system, or even if you're logged into your Google account or whatever through your car, all those points, all those locations are mapped just like they are on your cell phone. You're right. I mean,
when you go to these classes on cell phones, it's amazing because if you have, connect to your Wi-Fi, there was a bank robbery case. It wasn't mine, but it showed this guy literally driving around the bank because his phone was trying to connect to all the Wi-Fis that are, their guest Wi-Fis.
Yep.
And so the cops, the FBI was just like, it's all right here. We're looking for his GPS location. Coincidentally, it just happened to be right there. In fact, they had him casing the place, before the alleged robbery took place. And it's all right there.
Well, and it's funny because when you read through an application for a search warrant for a cell phone provider, one of the first things they have in the language is that the detective will put in there that through my training and experience, I know that it's customary for all Americans to have their cell phone with them wherever they go. And they'll put language like that in there because we do. We take our cell phone everywhere we go. And so it's constantly recording every single location you're at. Even if you have your GPS turned off, there's so many other apps running in the background. And it's pinging off of cell phone towers. They can use it for triangulation. And like you said, what Wi-Fi, routers or whatever has it bounced off of? I mean, yeah, it's just constant.
The amount of information is unbelievable. And not that we encourage anyone here to commit crime.
No.
But if people do,
don't take your cell phone.
Don't take your cell phone. I mean, and it's not even, you can say it jokingly, but it's like if somebody takes a cell phone, and I remember 20 years ago, I had a case where maybe a homicide took place, and then maybe the, dead guy's car and dead guy were burning out at a particular location, and they could just track the cell phone all the way there. And they parked right under a cell phone tower, not even knowing. Because this is 25 years ago, right? 20 years ago. No, what's that, right? Nobody even knew.
Right.
Cops knew.
Yeah.
And, you're sitting there like, oh, what do you want me to do with this?
and as you know, it's commonplace in almost almost every case that I see where cell phones are booked in as evidence.
Yeah, they just take them.
If you had it on you, if you had it in your car, if it was sitting next to you when they did a search warrant, they just take them. They book all of them in. They get search warrants for them all because they're just gold mines of information.
But some of the police still don't get it. They're filing these general warrants saying, we want to search the entire phone. Mm-hmm. And you have to be particularized as to what you're looking for and know that it's going to be there. Not just we're going to go rummage through it. That was kind of the whole Fourth Amendment thing, the colonials didn't like, we think you did something. We're going to come rummage through your house until we find it. We know you're guilty. Sedition against the king. You have this pamphlet of freedom and democracy. How dare you? So we had some really good luck over the last couple of years getting a lot of cell phone stuff suppressed. But, the DAs are educating the police officers now that you have to know what you're looking for. But, it's new technology. And we talked about a case today, the Massachusetts Supreme Court. Cops had a string of aggravated robberies. They didn't know who they're looking for. So they go and get a warrant. At least it was a warrant. But basically for every phone that pinged in this particular zone. So literally they got cell phone data on 50,000 people. Is that particularized enough? That's like saying, well, we think the family may have done something. We want everybody in the family's phone. we know we'll find it when, we know what we're looking for when we find it.
I have a murder case right now in the metro area where it was a crime spree over 3 or 4 days. And they did exactly what you're talking about at specific locations. And they plugged all of that data into a computer, and it pulled up 2 phone numbers that were at every location.
Yep.
And that's how they got the suspects.
I mean, it's good police work in one sense.
Great police work.
The question is
it legal?
Is it legal?
Right.
I think the courts are probably going to say it's legal. It's good police work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess it comes down to expectation of privacy. Do you have an expectation of privacy if you're carrying your phone everywhere and you have apps on and it's bouncing off of things, and I don't know.
Well, that's going to be the issue, I think. The Supreme Court says you have a certain expectation of privacy with everything that's in your phone. But all the data that goes up, that's the cell phone company's data. That's Google's data.
Right.
It's not yours, but nobody said they have to keep it absolutely private. They say they will until the police show up and say, can we have that cell phone data?
Right.
And most of the time they say, sure, just another case. We don't care.
I was amazed when I read that because I had not seen that in a case before. I did not know that they had that specific kind of technology where something was recording, was documenting, I guess, if you will, every single phone number, for lack of a better term, that was pinging off of a certain cell tower or a certain area.
Yeah.
Or how maybe it's not even pinging off of the cell towers. I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly how the information is collected, what it's registering or where it's registering. So I hadn't seen that before. That was the first time I had seen it, and I was amazed.
It's becoming the new, cool kid thing to do for the police officers is, we'll just get them this way. And, like I said, part of it's, okay, that's good police work, right? Until somebody says it's not legal, I guess it's legal because the judge granted them a warrant.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, at least, like you said, at least they got a warrant.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that may be the key point to where they did it versus if they just go and say, here's a subpoena, give me everything.
Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
So do you follow a lot of current cases going on right now? I mean, I know there's some that you can't avoid, obviously,
some of those really big ones, like you said, you can't help but see them. So I guess I follow some of those, certainly not to the extent that you do. George Floyd case I was fascinated by for a lot of reasons. I would say I'm familiar with them, but I don't follow all the details of them.
Do you follow the Elaine Maxwell case?
Yeah. Just a little bit. I've read some of the testimony, the pilot.
Yeah, but I mean, her attorneys are Laura Menninger and Jeff Paliuca from Haddon Morgan Foreman.
Oh, here in town?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think Laura's the lead counsel on that. And I mean, I remember, she's a smart woman. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think she went to Duke undergrad and Stanford Law.
Wow.
So
that's impressive.
Yeah. And then I think she went to work at like Goldman Sachs, and then she went to work at the public defender's office. Got her, I remember doing cases where, we had conflict clients or what have you. So it sounds like she's doing a great job out there, and the government blocked out 6 weeks for their case in chief, and they arrested after, I think, 8 days.
Wow.
Could you imagine a judge saying, you set this for 8 weeks and you scheduled it for 8, you're done in 8 days?
Yeah.
Can you imagine a federal judge?
You screwed up my whole docket.
Exactly. A judge has got to be livid.
Yeah.
I mean, you're wasting
weeks
of that time. He have cleared that schedule out.
Mm-hmm.
And attorneys are taken at their word that this is what's going to happen, right? Judge, we need 6 weeks. Okay, we're going to block 6 weeks. So they're not even starting up again until Thursday because the defense is like, we thought our witnesses were going to be here in like another 4 weeks, Judge.
Right.
We got to, get all these people, back again. And so I don't know what they're going to do, but when I talked to Laura Menninger briefly, she was very adamant that, she can win this trial. And if there's any, she's smart. Jeff Pagliuca, he's had some tough cases over the years and won them. They can. Who knows? And they got a couple of other people out of New York, but she's licensed in New York, and he may be as well. So,
I read the testimony of one of the victims, and it was impactful. It was powerful testimony, and but it's just such a long time ago, and you start wondering, some of the detail with which things are remembered after.
Yeah, seem to get a lot better memory once those dollar steins, they start adding zeros to,
right.
To the case, and their theme is memory, manipulation, and money. Isn't that great? From kind of the rule of three that they kind of teach in the advanced trial stuff is, like snap, crackle, and pop. People remember it. So they're going to get down there, memory, manipulation, money. Their memories fade. There's stuff where the victims are saying, I never said that. Oh, so the FBI agent got it wrong? Must have, because I never said that.
Mm-hmm.
No good prosecutor likes to hear that.
Right.
No case agent likes to hear that.
Right.
Manipulation that, look at the case, like I said, their memory got a lot better once their attorney said, hey, this case would be a lot better if there was a criminal case. And then, of course, the money. These people are getting paid $4, $5, $6, $7 million for this experience. And a lot of them, some of them were younger, like 60. But I think in all the cases where they say that, there's this child transportation, and I'm not condoning what they did. Okay, that guy named Jeff, we don't use his last name here because YouTube will shut us down.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Got to be very careful. Even in the world, even though a guy that's just like, screw the man, screw Google, they'll shut you down hard for using his last name. Yeah. So some people say, I don't. When we stopped using his last name and just referred to him as the man named Jeff, Google stopped demonetizing our videos.
Oh.
So anyway, so some of these women, young girls at the time, I don't think any of the places where they say that something took place, they were above the age of consent. So yes, it's weird, it's creepy, but is it illegal, right? And it's not like Elaine Maxwell is basically, they say they recruited him, but there's not been a whole lot of evidence that, I think one said, she hung out my high school and found me and said, hey, come over here,
Yeah, and I think one said at one point Maxwell touched her.
Yeah.
As
Touched
part
the
of
breast.
what the man named Jeff was involved in or whatever. So yeah. So
a massage, I think. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Was this a touching or was this a brush or
it feels awful lot like a prosecution because the person they really wanted is no longer available to be punished, to take the fall, to be held accountable, and we got to find somebody.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it feels like.
And that is sounds like what the defense is doing. And I wish federal courts allowed cameras into the courtroom. There's nothing that said, I'm not aware of any specific rule saying they can't do it. Hell, the Supreme Court, at least puts the audio out. Then put the audio out for every court route. I just think we should be able to see everything that goes on. I really, really do.
Yeah, there's like, I understand if you have an underage victim and you don't want their identity known and things I get that. But with technology, it's easy to, control where the camera is or have somebody blacked out or whatever it is. So I agree with you. It's all part of one. I think it would be a learning tool for a lot of people. A lot of people think that court is exactly what happens on TV, and everything's decided in an hour-long episode with commercials.
Don't you wish it was that easy?
Oh my gosh, yeah. But I also think, again, I think anytime people think that something is being kept from them, that there's a secret, that there's some inherent mistrust.
Well, the problem is, I think we've been proven so many times that when they hide stuff, the truth comes out later, and you're like, they're just lying to us.
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I mean, I think it's good to have a healthful distrust of the government. I think our founding fathers had a huge distrust of the government, hence the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, everything about the Bill of Rights is a limitation on government.
Right.
And
shows they didn't trust them.
They didn't trust them,
Right.
right? Because they knew First Amendment, right? You get freedom to assemble. Because what's the first thing that somebody does? Don't assemble, right?
Right.
And I'm a firm believer. You want to go out and protest all you want. But as soon as you start breaking somebody else's property,
That's not a
damaging
protest.
it, that's not a protest. That's just vandalism,
Right.
They knew, somebody wants to keep in power. Well, we can't have the press, writing stories about us. That'll be bad. Everything in the First Amendment, Second Amendment, and I've made I like guns. I have lots of guns. But as I tell clients all the time, they complicate everything.
Mm-hmm.
You carry a gun, right?
I do.
See, I let my concealed carry expire, and I just haven't gotten around to it because I moved. And
I'm just in so many. Well, to start, it was because I'm in a lot of questionable.
I remember going into questionable things
Yeah.
and saying, "Mark, you got your gun?"
Yeah. And I'm by myself. I don't have backup. But more and more, more and more, I carry almost everywhere I go. With things that are going on in this country, I certainly don't want to be defenseless if I've got my wife or my children with me. Well, granted, my children are grown now, but they're still my children.
Sure.
And so I don't want to be caught off guard. Plain and simple.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you gotta be able to take care of yourself. And
Yep.
people, I think some people are, we have a sponsor. One of them is the food prep stuff. And if you go to crimetalkprep.com, you can buy all the stuff and, what have you. And, oh, my God, Scott, you're a prepper. No. But, I mean, look at what just happened down in, Kentucky and Illinois. Towns for 250 miles wiped out.
Yep.
Okay, the government's going to get there eventually. In the meantime, all the people that weren't hit, they're going to come in and start looting your stuff.
Yep.
Right? You have no power. No gas, no electricity. What are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully you got stuff to take care of yourself because your car may be destroyed, your house is gone. What are you going to do? The power's out. It's not like you run down to the ATM and pull $20 out to go to the McDonald's, right? It's all gone.
Well, I don't know if you've seen. You talked about the smash and grabs in California, but another crime that's becoming common is where they follow people home. So whether it's from a bank or an expensive store or something, they pick out a target, a person with money, and then they follow them.
Yeah.
And it's not always when they get to their house. Sometimes they wait till they're on a secluded road or something like that. That's going on a lot of places. I mean,
Yep.
In the suburbs of Denver, there's a lot of stuff going on. All you have to do is read the news. And, I just don't want to be caught without a way to defend myself or my family. And you know what? I might die trying, but I'd sure rather die trying.
Yeah. And, it's a dangerous world out there.
It is.
And literally, like you said, they're following people home. You're just going about your business.
Yep.
Bad guys say, I pick you.
Yep.
Today, right? There was something on, the neighborhood, whatever
Yep.
thing the other day.
Next door.
So I see this thing. It's like, okay, it's near my neighborhood. She was walking back from the beauty store. A couple guys got out of their car, pointed a gun at her, stole her bag, her wallet, and the beauty items that she bought from the store, and they drove off. Mind her own business, and they just said, I pick you.
And she was fortunate that all they did was stole from her.
Exactly. They took her stuff. And then but people don't appreciate the psychological impact that has on somebody. Somebody pointing a gun at you. If you ever had it's kind of like testifying as a witness. Oh, they're a terrible witness. It's a lot different once you're up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody pointing a gun at you, it's a lot different when somebody's pointing a gun at you. You're like, suddenly things got very real all of a sudden.
Yep.
Right? But fortunately, I mean, these people could have been like, we're not going to take the risk that you're going to remember the car or get that license plate number. So, bam, you're dead, right?
Yeah.
And, it's not like there was a policeman on every corner, which goes back. And like I said, I don't want to sound like the world's coming to an end because I'm not that guy, but there aren't enough police in the world to take care of everybody. You have to be prepared to take care of yourself.
And even if a cop can get there in 5 minutes, I mean, most of the stuff we're talking about takes less than 5 minutes. I mean, most, even a burglary, they're not in there for 25 minutes. I mean, you and I have read a lot of police reports.
Watched a lot of videos of robberies too.
Yeah, robberies, burglaries, assaults, kidnappings, sexual assaults, attempted murders. I mean, a lot of those are really, really quick. And, if you're fortunate, it's just a burglary or it's just a robbery. And it's not an assault or a sexual assault or a murder, but it just as easily could be.
Yep.
And, I just don't want to be caught with my pants down. And it's something easy that I can do. I'm very comfortable with it. I was trained in it for a lot of years. And, believe it or not, my gun's never shot anyby. It's never jumped out of its holster and done anything bad.
Yeah.
And
no, I mean it's like I said, I like guns. I didn't grow up in
I didn't either.
I think my parents had one. It wasn't until after the military and where you get so familiar with it where you could literally assemble it, disassemble it blindfolded. Mm-hmm. And I'm not joking.
Right.
Like you have to do that.
Yep.
And you just because you got to field strip it in the dark, it's not working. You get so familiar with it. So I feel pretty comfortable with it, but you got to be smart about it. You got to be safe about it. And if you've never done it, most gun shops, they love to help new gun owners do things the right way.
But it's more than just knowing how to use a gun. Like, you need to understand if you're going to carry a gun, or even if you're going to have a gun at home, you need to understand when you can use one, when the law supports you using one, and when it doesn't. I've seen on Nextdoor a lot of people talking about, well, I hope I catch those guys breaking into my car because I'm going to go out there with my gun. You better not.
Yeah, you better not.
Because even if you point it at them, you're probably going to get charged with felony menacing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've said it a couple of times, and I'll probably get in trouble for it because, you see these smash and grabs, people taking stuff, and it's like, hey, that's my stuff. I'm like, oh, you may have insurance, whatever. I have bikes stolen out of my garage. Well, yeah, I had insurance, but now my insurance is going to go up, and it's going to get passed along to everybody.
Through no fault of my own.
I did nothing wrong. I didn't invite these people, and they stole my bikes, right? But I couldn't go shoot the people. But I think at some point, they used to be able to hang cattle rustlers, right?
Right.
You don't take other people. You don't take another man's cattle.
Right.
I think that's still a law in Texas. I don't know for sure. It may even be here. It should be, right? You don't take it, I've been watching too much Yellowstone, I think.
Yeah, but I love that show. But it's still their livelihood.
Yeah. You're taking somebody's livelihood.
Right.
You're taking away their stuff without their permission. If they wanted to give you that stuff, that's one thing. But I think eventually a legislator, somebody's going to say, hey, here's a bill. If somebody's on your property, they're taking your stuff, and they're haven't broken the threshold of the house, so to speak, you're going to be able to.
There's certain color states that ain't ever going to fly in. You and I both.
Oh, I know that. I know that. But I think eventually it's going to come to that because people are tired of lawlessness.
Yeah.
And
if the cops can't help us because there's not enough of them or because the laws are preventing them from helping us, then by God, we're going to take it. We're going to take it into our own hands.
And correct me if I'm wrong, right? Just like we have these cowards that go and do the school shootings, like up in Michigan or whatever. Not a whole lot of people shooting back, right?
Right.
How many gun stores are robbed in the middle of the day? Very few, right?
Yeah.
If ever.
Right.
Why is that? Because every guy working the counter, probably most shoppers in there, are carrying a gun.
Uh-huh.
You'd have to be the dumbest criminal ever to go rob a gun store during the day. You'd get shot.
But when you have a big sign that says no firearms allowed on premises, or state law that says you can't have a gun on a school ground, it's easy pickings.
And think about it, and that's why I'm telling I tell people, it's like I'm not doing this to sound like some crazy, man. But you have to take care of yourself, because the bad guys, and I've represented a lot of bad guys over the years, and some have been very nice people. They just done some really bad things, right? Mm-hmm. But you ask them, why did you go to that particular house? Well, they look like they wouldn't have guns, right? Because they know if they go inside that house, they get shot.
Or sometimes first is they made it easy. They left the garage door open.
Sure. Easy target.
And it looked like they wouldn't,
they're not going to get hurt.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not, in all likelihood, you're not going to go commit a crime at a place where you think the likelihood of you being confronted with somebody with a gun is higher.
They pick on the weak.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's it.
Yep.
I mean, and I've tried to convey that to people. It's like you don't want to cower. You don't want to, like, I've asked, many a client over the year, why'd you pick that house? It was easy pickings. I didn't think I was going to get hurt if I had confronted somebody.
Yep.
If I was confronted by somebody. It's the unknown.
Yep.
If they don't know what's on the inside, it's just, I mean, it's no different than the burglar looking for the easy target versus the pedophile who's out there. Well, why is this 9-year-old, out on social media sending photos? Well, apparently because mom and dad just don't care.
Right.
Mom and dad aren't watching what little Susie's doing on the internet at night. And I'm not victim shaming, but I'm just saying they look for people that, their parents don't care.
Yeah, I mean, why would you lock your doors at night when your kids are in the house, but you would allow your kids unfettered access to the internet?
And there's bad people out there on the internet.
Oh,
Mark,
my gosh.
How many cases have we had over the years, and other cases you've had on your own? And the internet is
poison.
Every creep out there. Look at the Josh Duggar case. Yep. Duggar rhymes with hugger, right? I mean, the jury of his peers promptly convicted him, right? Yep. What was his thing? Well, I'm not smart enough to create that little thing. Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
And he knew about, when the cops came to arrest him, like, "Are you hear about those downloads?" That's funny. We didn't mention those downloads, right? And I get it. He's not going to admit to the world that he is a pedophile. He's not going to do that. Family's super religious. He will rather go to prison for the next 14 years than admit to his family that he's got a problem.
Yeah. I've had more clients that have admitted to killing somebody than have admitted to sexually assaulting a child.
Yeah, because it's the worst of the worst.
It's the worst of the worst.
And they're not going to admit it. We'll go to trial.
Yep.
I mean, I had a case once. It was so bad. It was an incest case. And my guy was like, "She'll never testify against me." I'm like, "Yeah, she's going to be there. Your wife divorced you. You're in custody. Your family's standing behind you because they're your family. She'll never testify against me." I'm like, "She's going to testify against you. You should take the deal." Nope. And I remember leaning over as soon as that young woman walked into the courtroom. I literally leaned over and I said, "I told you so."
Want to take the deal now?
Well, there was no deal at that point anymore.
I know, but
and how many questions was it? Tell us about the bad things that took place in your house, and who was the bad man that did it? And they pointed to the defendant.
Yeah.
And what relation is he to you? Well, he was my dad, right? And just boom, like done, right? But he was going to go to his grave. He was never going to admit that. And you see that more often than not on sex offenses because they're not going to admit. I had a case in the military. It was terrible. Senior staff NCO. This guy was water walker Marine. Allegation came forward. DNA on various body parts, right? 4 attorneys, 2 civilian and 2 defense counsel, me. And in fact, my co-counsel is now the chief defense counsel of the Marine Corps.
Oh, wow.
Who's retiring next week in Quantico, Virginia, John Baker. And this is the guy that got held in contempt in Guantanamo because his defense lawyers were like, we have a conflict, we can't. And the judge was like, you're going to represent these guys. And he showed up and said, Judge, you can't tell my people who they're going to represent and who they're not. Like, they confined him to quarters for a week or whatever. They had to sue in federal court. It got thrown out. And but John Baker, we did this trial together. And, 4-week trial, 32-minute jury verdict, right? And the only defense was never happened. And they just kept coming. Like young Marines don't like to get up and say their first sectional encounter was with their senior staff NCO, right? Like, who did you piss off at the CIA, right? It's like, never happened. That was it. Wow. And, go spend better part of one's life because they didn't want to admit that they had a certain proclivity, which is no big deal anymore.
It's interesting that you brought up the sex assault thing because I've been working a lot more sex assault cases than I ever have before, and they seem to be a very common theme. I get a ton of them with college-age kids, where it's very similar facts. They go out to a bar usually. Sometimes it's a party. Everybody's having fun. Everybody's drinking. Boy and girl go back to the dorm room, and the next day or the next week, the girl says, I was too drunk to consent.
Yep.
And I'm finding it very interesting that more and more often there's no evidence. It's, you may have a videotape of them leaving a bar or something like that, but it's not even, a rape kit generally doesn't even do any good because it's not an issue of did they or didn't they.
It's a question of consent
and level of intoxication. And, as they're damn hard to defend because it's just one person's word against another person's word.
It's a swearing contest.
And, between police work and this, I've been doing this for 26 years, and I don't ever remember a time where nothing other than a person's word could get somebody arrested and charged. Yep. And more with sex assault cases, that's all it is.
Well, not to get, what's the word I'm looking for, political, so to speak, but when it comes to those type of cases, there was so much, you didn't test so many rape kits. Well, yeah, we didn't because there's limited resources and the victim didn't want to go forward, so we're not going to spend the resources. And then I think there was a law passed that you have to do it. The date rape cases are tough because, like I said, it's not a question of were they together or even if sometimes something happened. It's, is it a case of buyer's remorse or did somebody get a little too aggressive?
Well, and that's tough. But what I do know is, back when we were that age, there was such a thing. It was called the walk of shame. Mm-hmm. If you remember that from your college days, and it was, hey, and usually it was coming from the female perspective, but it was, I drank too much, and because I drank too much, I made a bad decision, and now I regret that decision. And it seems like, and I'm trying not to victim blame.
No, it's.
But it seems like now it's, I don't want to take accountability for drinking too much and making a bad decision. Therefore, I'm not responsible for that decision that I made. And I'm not, and I am not condoning having sex when you're drunk and all. I'm absolutely not. But in a lot of these cases, both people left the bar and walked back together and climbed up the stairs to the dorm and I don't know, whatever. They were texting, they were posting on Facebook, they were doing, and yet somebody is deciding that even with all of that, that person was too drunk to consent to sex. And I've worked so many of those. You could interchange the names and the facts would be almost identical. Yep. It's probably been 15 or 20 of them over the last 4 years at almost every college in Colorado.
Yep. It's becoming more a thing. And it's, as I would tell my son, one, if a girl says stop or no, have a wonderful evening, right? And if she's been drinking, I would tell him, do not
under any
do
circumstances.
anything with her.
Right.
Because you just never know. And you don't want to be that guy because, sex assault, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Oh. And the guys in prison don't think, oh, man, it's just a date rape case. Oh, you're in here for a sex assault?
Right.
You're suddenly at the bottom of the barrel.
Yep.
And like I said, we've represented lots of people that have, it wasn't a date rape thing. It was a bad sexual assault.
Yes, it was. Absolutely.
And there's no doubt. But like you said, when you get these things where there's two people, nothing that says there was force. It was just, I didn't mean to. And I told him to stop. And he said, well, no. She said, don't stop. It's.
Or I didn't say anything.
It didn't say anything. Yeah. And so, the kid's looking to spend the rest of his life in prison. He said he didn't do it. The DA wants to send him away. And what do you do with this kid? Hey, they're making an offer. Plead guilty, attempted sex assault. We have to register as a sex offender. But
for the rest of your life.
But you won't have to, do this stuff. And that's the toughest part about these jobs is they know their case is weak. They know their victim has trouble, but they're playing with house money. Mm-hmm. Hence the reason why they just made you a misdemeanor sex offense offer.
Right.
Because they know their case sucks. Do you want to go to trial and risk it? Maybe you get a bad jury that day. Maybe she comes across as a great witness that day. I'm like, I can go do my lawyer stuff, but at the end of the day, if they believe her over you, you're going to prison, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the toughest thing about this job is having to tell people, hey, you got a choice to make, and obviously don't plead guilty to something you didn't do. But, usually some poor decisions have been made by all parties to get us to where we are, particularly in date rape type of cases. And, they're tough.
And I would never tell anybody who feels they're a victim of sexual assault not to report it. Absolutely report it if you feel you're a victim. I guess all I would say, and I have 2 college-age daughters, and for that matter, I have a college-age son. And I guess what I would say is, just give it a few moments thought before you report it, and make sure that you are not merely trying to not take responsibility for your own actions, yeah. Or, you know what I mean? And we've had the cases where it came out because boyfriend said to the girl the next day, where were you? And, oh my gosh, I have to say that I was sexually assaulted.
You're with him?
Right. Yeah.
That guy's a dork.
Right. Those kind of things. And so again, if you are a victim, you absolutely report it. You absolutely do. But again, and I had this conversation with my daughter, and I said, what young women need to understand is that while it may be embarrassing for them to admit that they did this, merely making the allegation is life-changing to that young man. Even if he's not arrested, even if he's just investigated, now there's already a stigma that comes with that. And then if he's arrested, even if he's not convicted, you have that arrest, or in the worst case scenario, like you said, he can't risk going to prison for the rest of his life. So he takes that misdemeanor plea. And even though he doesn't go to prison, he's registering as a sex offender for 5 years. And oh, by the way, you have that conviction on your record, even though it's a misdemeanor, for the rest of your life. And that is life-changing. And so
for all parties,
I absolutely agree.
Like I said,
absolutely agree.
Like I said, I don't think most women want to go report that, and I think they take it because I think most people appreciate that. But we've all had cases where we find out later that they tell a friend or during the course of the investigation, like, well, yeah, I really did. I was just a little embarrassed by the whole thing. We've had those cases, and I just that's why they're so tough. Because you just don't know. It's not like somebody was dragged into the alley by a complete stranger. I mean, I had a case once where couples meet at a bar. They go back. Guy's thinking he's, feeling pretty good about himself. The woman comes out of the restroom afterwards, and she looks at him and says, "You sexually assaulted me." And the guy's sitting there like, what the... she grabs her friend downstairs who's doing stuff with him and said, let's go, right? This guy's a professional. We go to trial. I cross-examine the victim, and her story just didn't make sense. Came back from lunch one day, and I had a motion to dismiss. Second day of trial. My guy's like, I don't know if I'm going to prison for the rest of my life or what. I mean, scared to death. And the DA finally agreed, yeah, no one's going to believe her story. I'm like, that's the story she's been saying, that she didn't report this the next day. I mean, the whole interview was just weird and creepy and just made no sense. You know, she was trying to get back together with her boyfriend and kind of felt guilty and this and that. It all came out on cross-examination, but yet she put this guy's entire life at complete risk because she wanted to get together with her boyfriend. And that's the kind of stuff that people don't hear about on a regular basis, because there are lots of real victims out there.
There absolutely are. I agree 100%.
And I mean, it's just scary as hell out there.
And most of the cases are not the nightmare that everybody has where you're drug into a dark alley. You and I both know that
it's usually somebody you know.
Absolutely. The overwhelming number of cases are somebody you know, whether it's a dating situation, whether it's a member of the family, whether it's a friend of the family. Absolutely. It's somebody you know.
And you know, you had teenage daughters, but I remember my daughter was in college and she turned 21. We went out, we met her at Vegas, and we went home, and you know, she's literally at the pool party with a group of friends. You know, the guys are like, hey, you know, knocked her out, had no memory. Thank God she had a good friend there that took care of her and did that. But somebody roofied her in broad daylight at a pool. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's just you got to be so careful out there, and that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of good people in the world, but there are a lot of bad people in the world as well.
Yep.
So
I actually wrote. My daughter was an RA in the dorm last year, and she asked me to write up a kind of a 1-page safety tips thing for her, and so we, you know, that's what I wrote, and she handed it out to all the girls on her floor about, you know, if you go to a party with a group of people, you leave with the group of people, and you know, you never pick up a drink that you set down, and you know, and on, and about, you know, walking back or walking from someplace, about, you know, all those things that you can imagine. And unfortunately, that's all stuff that, you know, young people, well, all people need to be aware of. And because like you said, there are bad people out there that want to take advantage of people. And it's no different than when we were talking about the burglaries. They're looking for an opportunity. They're looking for somebody who's an easy victim.
Yep.
And, you know,
if you're drunk and been drinking,
you're an easier victim.
You're an easier victim. The odds just went up exponentially.
Yep.
That something like that is
absolutely
going to happen, and not paying attention, have a good party. Oh, I'm partying, hey, it's a good time. Yeah.
Just like we said earlier, you need to be prepared to take care of yourself.
Yep, you have to. You have to be aware of your surroundings,
everywhere you go,
circumstances. You know, they used to refer to it in the military as the OODA loop, right? Observe, orient yourself, decide, act.
Yep.
Some people have an OODA loop of about the size of a Cheerio. They can, you know, they're cat-like reflexes. Right. Other people have the size of like a hula hoop.
Oh,
they're really slow and they don't get it, and they're naive, and they think everybody's a good person and there's no evil in the world, and if we all just had a big hug, the whole world would be a much better place. And it's not that way. That's what I've said it before. It's like, if people, what's the word I'm looking for? If people knew how much crime there actually was in the world, they would lock their doors at night, get themselves a good firearm, get in the fetal position, and not come out.
Yep.
I mean, the stuff that you hear about in the evening news, you know, the flavor of the month. Oh, another teacher sexually assaulted a student. Oh, let's have the football story, and then the three-legged dog story to make us all feel better, then some weather and sports, right? You don't hear about the hundreds of arrests that take place every day of violent stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It'll never, and frankly, that stuff doesn't make the evening news because the news people know it's too graphic.
Or even it's so often, it's so commonplace that it's really not even newsworthy. Like, it has to be, you know, your run-of-the-mill murder isn't even newsworthy anymore. It's got to be something outrageous, or it's got, you know what I mean? It just seems like, I mean, you've seen the statistics with the murder rate in the Denver metro area and stuff like that. And I don't know if they could even put all of them on the news.
Yeah.
You know, people get so used to it, it's just turn on the next channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Just to be clear, somebody wrote a comment that says, what if your son was date raped by a guy? Do you tell him the same thing as you said to your daughters? That whole conversation was condescending to women. See ya. All right, 1962 PJH. No, I think the point that we are both making is that we've seen so many of these cases where it turned out not to be what they thought it was because they were embarrassed. They can't believe they did it with that guy. Their friends are laughing at them. Oh, it must have been, he took advantage of me. And people think, oh, you're being condescending. No, we deal with this crap every day.
Right.
And one of the things I like to say, being a defense attorney, is we get to talk about the elephant in the room, right? Are there legitimate victims of sex assault? Absolutely.
Many, many, many of them. Absolutely.
But are there also people that make this stuff up? Absolutely. We just finished a case. Remember the one that we just finished up, where the allegations where they said, the 5-year-olds.
Yes.
Complete fabrication.
Right.
I got her to admit on the stand that she'd fabricated it basically with the help of her mother, right? And people think, oh, no, that doesn't happen. Believe the children, right? But the problem is nobody cross-examines anybody until they get to trial. Right. And they just take everything as their what's the word I'm looking for?
It's taken on face value.
It's just taken on face value. Nobody's cross-examined and said,
right.
Well, you say you were drunk, huh? But you were able to walk across the street. You were able to do this. There's just so many things that come in. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. There's a bunch of perverts in the world. But each case has to be looked at differently. You can't say they always, it happened or it's always a lie. You can't.
From a police perspective, sexual assaults, especially the last 15 years, are a completely different animal when it comes to investigation. And you can ask any sex assault detective that you know. You do not question a victim. You don't.
Yeah. Because then they're perceived as looking at victim shaming.
Right. And
how dare you?
Exactly. And so, sex assault's probably more so than any other crime. Obviously, you can't ask a murder victim, but you do not question the credibility of a sexual assault victim. You just don't. Maybe in the most extreme, outlandish story, maybe they would, but these run-of-the-mill ones that I'm talking about, and I don't use that term lightly.
But they happen so often. People
Right.
don't know how
Right.
frequently these are reported.
Exactly. And those kind of cases, police detectives do not, and in most cases are not allowed to start asking qualifying questions of the victim, because you're right. There's, political issues and social issues and Me Too movement and a whole lot of different things that have come up in our society in the last 15 years. And so it is taken at face value.
Mm-hmm.
And
the only time the complaining witness is questioned
is on the stand.
is on the witness stand.
Yep.
And we see that in children cases and adults. It's just the tactic that the prosecution, it's like they don't want to know because we don't want to be the bad guys. We'd rather lose a trial than to say we didn't believe the victim, basically put it on the juror.
And you've even seen motions where the prosecution is asking that the victim not have to testify, that their statement or their recorded interview or whatever be admitted so that they don't, instead of them testifying. So they, even in those cases, they don't want them confronted.
Yeah. No, I deal with it all the time, and it's just it's reality of the world, and some people don't like it. It's like, always believe the victim, always believe the children. Okay, to a point, but at a certain point, everyone's got to do their job, and the right of confrontation says you get to ask the tough questions in court that no one has asked up to this point. Right? Look at the Elaine Maxwell case. All the stuff that came in on cross-examination, why wasn't that asked? Because nobody at the FBI bothered to ask. Oh, it said this happened? Okay. And
can you give me some details?
Yeah.
Well, and this whole believe the victim, and to some degree, like you said, I agree. But I would put it back on the people that are saying, you know, I'm anti-woman or whatever they said. If it was you that was accused, or if it was your child that was accused, or somebody you cared about, would you hope that a police detective was questioning that victim thoroughly? Would you hope that a thorough and impartial investigation was done? Or would you be satisfied that, well, the victim said it happened, the police detective said it happened, so
Good enough for me.
it's good enough for me. Sorry, son, you're going away for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we get calls literally every week on very similar type situations. And, you know, and I'm telling you, if the cops do a good job and a good investigation, I got to tell the client, like, dude, you're
Absolutely.
in trouble. And that's what everybody thinks.
You and I have had those conversations together with plenty of clients.
It's like, this is not good. You
Right.
don't want to do this. They did a thorough job. She's credible, right? But when they do a crappy investigation, that opens up the doors. We talked about beforehand. You know, if the cops do their paperwork right, there's nothing for the defense to do.
That's right.
And people don't get that. And like I said, in those type of situations, you know, the jury has to be the judge ultimately. But let the chips fall where they may. You got to ask the tough questions. And frankly, that gives legitimacy to it. If those tough questions are asked and the jury or the defendant says, wow, I'm taking a plea, that's good for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying, oh, we can't ask those questions. Well, that's just like the same people that say, how dare you ask questions of politicians, or how dare you question that? You
You should believe them.
just believe them because
Right.
we said so.
Right.
So anyway, it's anyway, I'm sure we offended a couple of people.
Well,
But that's, I mean, I'm not
Sometimes
trying to
the
look
truth
offended.
is- sometimes the
it's
truth
the
is
truth.
ugly.
Yeah, and you know, like I said, it's just the way the world. There's so much stuff that goes on, and everybody acts like this stuff. What's the word I'm looking for? It's always brand new, like this never happened. I was talking to Rob, and he's like, "Man, I'm reading these old cases, and nothing's changed. Like cases from like 1930s. It's the same stuff.
Mhm.
Nothing's changed. It's the same crime. Okay, you add a couple of computer crimes, I guess. But what's the heart of a computer crime? It's really fraud, theft by deception, right? It just changes the format of it. But all the stuff of sexual assaults, SAOC on children, all those types of things, they've been going on for centuries, and everybody acts like, oh, what should we do? They took care of this problem years and years ago. It was common sense, but there's been a death of common sense in America, I think, when it comes to
a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, if your son, is living in the basement, never had a girlfriend at 35 or whatever, but wants to work at Chuck E. Cheese,
You might
be
wanna-
afraid.
You might want to question that.
Be afraid. Be very, very afraid.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Can you believe we've gone over 2 hours? Doesn't it seem like 10 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, but you and I have spent plenty of time chatting, so it kind of felt just like
Yeah.
that. So.
I hope everybody enjoyed it. Some people were like, oh, I can't believe that you're a bunch of men talking in the comments. Like, okay. Like,
I'm not sorry I'm a man.
I know. It's just there are legitimate allegations, and there's some that are not exactly the way they're stated.
With every type of crime.
With every type of crime. People exaggerate. Oh, my bike was stolen. It was the best bike in the world. Do you have a receipt for that? You don't? Oh, you got it at, it's $500, not $5,000. Oh, how dare you ask those tough questions, young man? It's the same thing. And that's what we do.
Or you mean this bike I just found in your garage? The one you're turning in the insurance claim for, that bike? Same thing.
Yeah, it is a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's nothing new. It's all gone on. And you want people to ask those questions, right? We're the guys that everybody hates until they need them, and then they want them to ask those tough questions.
Which is kind of like cops right now. Society wants to hate cops until they need them. So it's kind of the same kind of thing. But, I would hope that whether you're police or prosecutor or defense attorney or defense investigator or judge, anywhere in the system, the goal should be justice.
Yeah.
And justice means that the truth comes out.
And the truth comes out only by asking
Questions.
the hard questions.
Yes.
That's what people don't get. People get so focused on this is their narrative, right? And I get it. Bad things happen to people, and they're like, this happened to me. I will forever. I get it.
Absolutely.
You know, and I have seen the emotional trauma of, for example, like sex assault victims or people that had been victim of violent crimes. That stuff doesn't go away.
Right.
It goes there for a lifetime.
Yep.
And I will never forget. We were doing voir dire in a SAOC case. It was in Adams County. And I'd never seen so many jurors excused for cause. And there was this lady, this juror. She had to have been in her 70s, like upper 70s, almost 80s. And she had put on her questionnaire that she had been the victim of sexual assault. And so everybody that put that or had a close family member as a victim of sexual assault, we talked to them in chambers. And this woman, like I said, late 70s, she said that she was inappropriately touched by a family member years and years ago. Hadn't thought about it probably in decades, she said. Coming to court, doing her public service as a juror, and you could see she started talking about it, and just all those years of just, not talking about it, not thinking about it, had all come back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're a lady in her 70s. Something happened when they were a kid, and it all came back. She may have blocked it out. I mean, she don't, but it all came back. And I think that's what people don't think takes place. They're like, oh, it's just this, it's just that. Or they're a victim of violent crime. I've seen people who were a victim of violent crime, somebody got stabbed, and they're like, I can't go to work. It happened at a place in my business, and I can't go back. I can't work. I had to switch jobs.
I don't
it
feel
doesn't make
safe
as much
anywhere.
money. I don't feel
Yep.
safe. It's affected my family relationships. And that's a real thing, And it's, and it sucks sometimes having to be the person to ask those tough questions. But when those tough questions are asked and the truth comes out, we have to look at our client sometime and say, I can't do much for you anymore, man.
Right.
Like I told you to take that deal. I'm telling you to take that deal, right? But you don't get there unless you do the investigation and ask the hard questions. And I think that's the biggest thing people have. Oh, those defense guys are, no, we're doing our job required under the United States Constitution. That's what it comes down to.
And if you were the accused,
you'd want me asking those questions.
Yep.
Right? It's always like the people that, I want mandatory minimum sentences until it's their kid.
Right.
And then they're like, well, my son's different. He's a good guy who did this, and now he's got to go to prison.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so you can never speak in absolutes. I always think this. I never do this. I absolutely, positively, this is my opinion, and it can never change. Right? And when I was young, it was like, oh, yeah, that's right, wrong. But as you get older, you realize there's a lot more gray areas out there. And what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another. And what you think is the truth when you find out you've been lied to. Wasn't there that song? It wasn't I think it's a song like out of the early 70s. I was just a kid, but I've heard it. It says, what do you do when what do you do when you find out what they've said all along is a big lie, right? And that's how you get, I think, doing this work, whether it's police officer, investigator, and music, is you've seen so many people just lie.
Mm-hmm.
And people in position of authority, or they use their position of authority to say, I'm a good guy. I would never do that. And you're just like, I don't care what your name is, your last name, who your daddy is, what your position is. You're just another guy or woman who's in trouble, who's willing to lie, gonna lie or try to lie to get out of something. Mm-hmm. And it kind of sours your face. Like some people are like, oh, that's Senator so-and-so. Ooh, I should be impressed. No, because you know what? I know a lot of crap about that guy. Or, oh, Mr. So-and-so, he's Mr. philanthropist gives away a lot of money. And you're like, yeah, let me tell you about the prostitution ring that's being run out of his apartment that his wife didn't know about. You want to go there? And so I'm just not impressed by titles, people, position, their last name. Nah, you're just...
And the bottom line is, whether you are male or female, young or old, we're all human, and we all exaggerate or maybe lie or maybe tell half-truths or white lies or whatever you want to call them. And so it's not just our clients that lie to us or lie to the police. It can be other people too. It doesn't have to be you're lying about something that you really did do, saying I didn't do it. A lie can also be saying something happened that didn't happen. And I don't know how often that happens. I have no idea.
Not telling the whole truth of what did happen.
Exactly, not telling the whole truth. So again, it comes down to, is somebody asking all the necessary questions, and is the truth really coming out? And if the truth really comes out, then justice will be done. And at least in my mind, and when the truth doesn't come out, that's when I worry that justice is not being done, whether that's regardless of what that justice looks like. Justice could be a not guilty verdict, just like it could be a guilty verdict.
Absolutely.
So
I know it's like I said, maybe become a little jaded, I guess, but you've just seen so many people in positions of authority. I don't idolize anybody. The problem is, heroes usually will disappoint.
Yes, because they're still human.
Because they're human.
Yep.
Right?
Yep,
we're all
absolutely.
Completely, we're all human.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, wow, we went a long time. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us, Mark. Hopefully you'll come back
Absolutely.
Again. Hope everybody did enjoy it. Let's see.
Hope I didn't piss off too many people.
No. It's all. Hey, here's one thing you have to realize, Mark. No matter what you say, somebody's going to disagree with you. If you say, give the defendant due process rights, how dare you victim shame,
Right.
You can't take it too personal because I swear to God,
you're never going to please everybody.
Just wait till you mispronounce the name, okay? We have embraced the Duggar matter. I'm like, it's Dugar, right? This looks like a Dugar to me. Oh my God! Every comment, you mispronounced it. It's Duggar, and I think it was Julie that said it's Duggar. Like rhymes with hugger.
How appropriate.
And so we've embraced that. Some people are like, oh my God, that just cracks me up. Other people are like, man, that's just so. One real quick thing before we go. The Barry Morphew case. Have you followed that one over there in Salida?
A little bit. Not every detail, but I have a little bit, yeah.
So the defense counsels today filed a motion to disqualify the judge. All right. And apparently the girlfriend of Barry Morphew is represented by a firm, and the judge is good friends with one of the members of the firm, which is interesting, and it's Ms. Darky. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name exactly. Anyway, the judge disqualified himself because the firm that represents Ms. Dark said that he needed to recuse himself in her case, the girlfriend's case, because of the law firm McDermott, Stewart, and Ward, because apparently the judge knows Sean McDermott, and he's a partner in the firm, and they represent the girlfriend. But the weird thing kind of is the last name for McDermott, Stewart, and Ward is obviously Ward. Now, most people don't get it. But Drew Nielsen, who represents Mr. Morphew of ITAN and Nielsen, is married to Tom Ward.
Oh, gosh.
So it's one of those things like you're going to go around throwing around conflict and things like that, like saying that, you have to kick yourself off the case because of that case, but now she's a witness in this case. I mean, I mean, I don't think there's a conflict necessarily for Morphew's attorney just because they're, I mean, I don't know if they've walled him off, what have you. But, to take out a judge, figuratively speaking, or, to make him say that he's conflicted off, be careful what you wish for. You may not get the judge that you like. And so far, I think this judge has been pretty darn fair to Mr. Morphew. I mean, he said, hey, there's probable cause for this murder case, but it's kind of weak. And he gave him a bond of like $500,000, which he paid the next day. So,
isn't he a visiting judge or a senior judge?
They only have, I think, one judge over there that sits full time.
Oh, okay.
And he handles misdemeanors and obviously the district court felony cases. But when the misdemeanor case came before him, he apparently recused, and they had a different county court judge come in and do that, as Judge Murphy. So they're saying, well, Judge Murphy needs to get off as well because he, it's not because he hates this firm. It's because he recused himself because he said, I'm friends with Sean McDermott, and I don't want any allegations of, impropriety. He's doing the right thing. I'm not sure this rises to that level, but their motion makes it sound like the judge has to get off. But, we'll wait and see how that develops. I'll take a closer look at it, but that's going to be an interesting case.
It's been an interesting case anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they have no body. How many cases? I mean,
it's rare.
Unless you have somebody that says, well, the reason you're not going to find any bodies is because we chopped them up and, or they're buried under the cement. That's how you do it. Normally you need the body to come in and say they're actually dead. It's one of the elements they have to prove.
Right.
And some judge saying, well, she's been gone a long time. I think she's dead. I mean, you just I guess it's a fact, but
well, there's a ton of problematic circumstantial stuff. All the dumpsters he visited the next morning in Broomfield or wherever it was, and so there's a ton.
And that's
of
just down the street from us.
I know, but again, it's tough to prove a murder case without a body.
I mean, we had the was it Patrick Frahey, the one down in the Springs. It was in Teller County, but they had the girlfriend.
Oh yeah.
Who was represented by Drew Nielsen.
Yeah, the girl from Wyoming or wherever.
Idaho.
Right, yeah.
And she said, hey, the reason you're not going to find the body because, well, we chopped her up and we burned her, and here's the spot. And, well, here's a couple little bones over here. So you had some corroboration of that. And we talked about this,
right.
Lots of, what do DAs like the best? Story from witness, corroboration.
With evidence, yep.
That's what DAs love.
Yep.
And when you don't have it, I mean, I don't know. I think the DAs in this case, I think they got a little ahead of their skis, and it's not going to be a slam dunk like they thought it was going to be. So, because he's putting up a fight, and he sued the cops, he sued the DAs for not turning over exculpatory information. So that ought to get their attention too.
It also says a lot, I think, that his daughters support him 100%. I found that a very interesting fact.
Yeah. I sent Julie down to watch the preliminary hearing.
Oh.
And I think she was even surprised that the lack of evidence. Correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, right?
Oh, yeah.
She was like, oh, yeah, he's guilty. She sat through the preliminary hearing, and she's like, please tell me there's something more. Like, if this is a preview of what they've got, this isn't good enough.
Wow.
I mean, am I misstating anything?
No, that's it. I'm excited for the trial.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the trial's, I think, in May. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Well, I guess we should wrap it up here. We've been going for 2.5 hours. Can you believe that? All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks
Hopefully
for
do
having
it again. Thanks for all of our subscribers. We appreciate you joining us. Hopefully everyone stayed with us a long time. I know it was a long conversation, but hopefully you enjoyed it. I mean, got a lot of experience here with Mark, and it's kind of nice that it's not just me saying things like somebody else saying, yeah, Scott, right, it's a dangerous world out there. Be careful of the world and question things. Don't take everything at face value because it's not always what it appears to be. You have to take it with a grain of salt. So, all right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Crime Talk.